Chapter 350. The price quickly rose to 100 million. For a place like the sea god's tomb, which was the tomb of an innate god, everyone wanted to find treasures inside, especially the sea god's godhood. The godhead of the innate god was a true treasure. As long as one obtained the godhead of the sea god, not only would they have the hope of becoming a god, but they would also obtain the power of the sea god. This was an ability that the postnatal god's godhead didn't have. In the maritime kingdom, there was no lack of water mages. Wasn't the ultimate goal of water mages to become a water mage god? Wind had the opportunity to become the sea god. No matter how dangerous the innate god's tomb was, it was believed that a large number of people would want to enter. And the person who obtained the sea god's key would definitely have an advantage in the sea god's tomb. The 3 sea god's keys were said to be the weapons of the sea god. They possessed unimaginable power. Therefore, the person who obtained the keys would not only obtain the qualification to enter the sea god's tomb earlier than others, but also a powerful sacred tool. Ming Shi and the others had experienced the power of the sea god's key. They had suffered a great loss from the sea god's key. If they hadn't succeeded in finding out the truth, they might not have been able to leave Death Island. If the other 2 keys had the same ability, they would be worth the price. 200 million. Caesar increased the price again. The Blakeston family would never give up on the sea god's key. Caesar had come to the maritime world this time for the sea god's tomb. The 3 sea god's keys were also treasures that his family was determined to obtain. Legend had it that collecting all 3 keys would allow one to obtain the sea god's sacred tool, the sea god's scepter. If a family possessed a sacred tool, even if they couldn't reach the heights of the 4 great empires, they would still become one of the top few families. The reason why the Blakeston family was ranked 7th among the 10 great families was because they didn't have a sacred tool. As long as he could obtain one of the 3 keys, he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to obtain the other 2 keys after spending some time. Thinking about the legend of the 3 keys, Caesar's heart was not without worry. Ever since the sea god fell during the Great War of Gods and Demons, the 3 keys had never been found at the same time. 2 of the 3 keys had been wandering the world, and had been possessed by many masters, but no one had ever found the 3rd key. The 3rd key, which had yet to appear, was what worried Caesar the most. However, even if he could not find the 3rd key, the sea god's key was still a rare sacred artifact. Obtaining it would not be a loss. No one would have thought that the 3rd key would be in an ordinary mortal village. If Yanemo and the others hadn't heard about the key by chance and harbored evil intentions, who knew how long the 3rd key would have stayed in that small village? 500 million. Another private room called out, and this time, he increased the bid by 100 million. The aristocratic families on the 2nd floor began to bid one after another. Only the mysterious Box 0 and Box 0 did not make a move. No one could guess whether the people in these 2 boxes did not want to participate in this auction at all, or whether they wanted to make a move at the end. At this moment, an extraordinarily handsome middle-aged man was sitting in Box 0 with a smile on his face. He was watching the intense bidding outside while eating some snacks. Next to the man was a beautiful woman. She looked to be about the same age as Le Shui, and there was a trace of arrogance in her expression. Every movement she made was filled with confidence. Father, why don't we bid for the key? If we can get it, our family will have 2 keys. If we can find the 3rd one, it'll be a sacred artifact. Lu Fei said with some disappointment. Fei, do you remember what I told you and your brother? There are some things you can do, and some things you can't do. The man was the first island master of Jade Drop Island, Lu Wuji. Jade Drop Island was made up of 12 islands of different sizes. Lu Wuji was in charge of the largest island, while the other 11 islands were divided among the other 11 island masters. Lu Wuji was very close to the other 11 island masters. The 12 of them were sworn brothers, and had been part of a mercenary group together in the past. They had made quite a name for themselves. If it weren't for their deep friendship, how could they have worked together to establish Falling Jade Island? Father, are you saying that we can't bid for the Neptune's key? But why is that? Lu Fei blinked, not quite understanding. Who knows how many great families and super families have their eyes on the Neptune's key. There's no room for anyone else to interfere. If we overestimate ourselves and try to get the key, I'm afraid our family and your uncles won't be able to keep their lives. No matter where you were, the strong were respected. If you wanted to live long, you had to know what you could and couldn't do. If you didn't have a sense of propriety, you could only blame yourself if you died. It's that serious? Lu Fei's heart trembled. Lu Fei had never doubted her father. Her father, Lu Wuji, was a truly intelligent man. All these years, Jade Drop Island had flourished, and no one had dared to try to get their hands on it. Lu Wuji's intellect was recognized by everyone. Then the Neptune's key in our hands. Lu Fei was a little worried. She hadn't thought about it before, but after knowing that the Neptune's key would bring trouble to their family, the child immediately gave up on the Neptune's key. Lu Wuji shook his head. Don't worry. At the very least, no one will try to get their hands on Jade Drop Island for now. Lu Wuji already had a plan in mind. He wasn't worried that someone would try to get their hands on the 12 islands, just because of the Neptune's key. The conversation between Lu Wuji and his daughter wasn't heard by outsiders. Under Lu Shui's control, the Neptune's key had already reached a high price of 1 billion. Only when the price reached 1 billion did the bidding slow down. No one raised the price by 100 million, but at the very least they raised it by 1 million. Finally, after a new round of bidding, the Neptune key was purchased by Caesar at a price of 1.57 billion gold coins. This price was already higher than the price of an ordinary saint artifact. In the past, the highest price for a saint artifact was 1 billion. 1.5 billion this time was already a very high price. If it weren't for the fact that the Neptune's key wasn't just a saint artifact, but also the key to open the Neptune's tomb. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many conditions, Caesar wouldn't have bought the Neptune's key at a price that was several hundred million more than an ordinary saint artifact. After the Neptune's key was sold, the auction came to an end. People began to leave one after another. Chapter 351. Everyone in the box had a special exit passage, so they didn't need to squeeze with others. After the auction ended, Ming Shi and the others didn't stay long. They took the packed snacks and Feng Wu's new ancient Rue beast, and happily walked through the VIP passage. As soon as they walked out of the passage, they found that some people were looking at them. Some people even came up directly to give Ming Shi and the others an invitation to their house. Ming Shi just smiled and didn't say whether he would go or not. For these social activities, Ming Shi and the others had no interest at all. These people who went to Ming Shi were the butlers and servants of the major families. They all wanted to know who was sitting in the mysterious zero box, and they all had the intention of winning over them. However, these people from the major families were very arrogant. They wouldn't stand there and block people in person. For them, sending the family's butlers was already a very good thing. After all, the people who usually sent invitations were only ordinary servants. Only those with the same status could send the family's butlers in person. However, all of this had nothing to do with Ming Shi. They didn't plan to go to any of the appointments. Feng Wu walked next to Ming Shi with the new ancient Rue beast in her arms. From time to time, she used her spiritual force to communicate with the baby Rue beast. The two of them communicated happily. Feng Wu was a child who had a lot of affinity with animals, since she was a child. Although the baby Rue beast didn't say it, it could still be found that it liked Feng Wu very much. Not far from Ming Shi and the others, Zicheng, Eve, and Rika quietly watched the scene of Feng Wu coming out with the Rue beast egg. Eve had always disliked Feng Wu. Seeing that she had snatched the ore that Zicheng liked very much, she was very upset. Her first reaction was to rush over and ask Feng Wu to obediently return the Rue beast egg to Zicheng. In her mind, as long as Zicheng wanted it, it was Zicheng's. No matter who it was, they should give the things that Zicheng liked. Otherwise, it would be a heinous crime with a vicious heart. If it wasn't for Zicheng who pulled her back, she would have already rushed forward by now. In another corner, Irene and Elisa were also quietly watching Ming Shi and the others. Irene really didn't expect to meet Ming Shi and the others here. Although Ming Shi and the others were also traveling on the sea, Irene didn't know the exact location. Most of her attention was focused on Zicheng's situation. So they want that ore. If you like it, you can go and buy it from them. Elisa saw Irene with her head lowered in contemplation and thought that she wanted the ore, so she helped her. Elisa. Xiazhua didn't expect to see Elisa here. His mind was filled with thoughts. In his previous life, Elisa was killed by her fiancé, his own brother. In this life, he must protect Elisa and not let her end up in the same miserable state as in her previous life. Xiazhua. Elisa heard the sound and turned around. When she saw Xiazhua, she was stunned, her mouth wide open. As far as she knew, Xiazhua rarely left his home, let alone traveled far. How could she not be surprised to see him on Jadefall Island? Elisa, long time no see. How have you been? Suppressing his excitement, Xiazhua tried his best not to appear too different from usual. Elisa winked playfully. Long time no see? We clearly saw each other 2 months ago. Don't tell me you've forgotten that we've met before. With that, Elisa pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. And this is? Xiazhua didn't answer Elisa's question. Instead, he looked at Irene. He didn't notice before, but now that he was closer, he realized that there was something wrong with this girl. First of all, he was very sure that this girl had never appeared by Elisa's side in her previous life. Secondly, he sensed a familiar energy fluctuation from the girl's body. Only souls that had passed through the time tunnel would be tainted with this energy. Did this girl also come back from the future? Xiazhua's mind flashed with all kinds of guesses, but he didn't show it on his face. His expression was calm and his eyes were gentle. This is my new friend Irene. Irene, this is my childhood sweetheart, and my fiancé's younger brother Xiazhua. Elisa introduced the two to each other. Hello Xiazhua. Irene greeted Xiazhua naturally and gracefully. Xiazhua warmly returned the greeting. Hello Miss Irene. Irene tried hard to recall who this Xiazhua was. Her fiancé's younger brother? Wasn't that the male lead's younger brother? The male lead's younger brother. Ah, she remembered that the male lead had a useless younger brother. That younger brother was both magic and dookie trash since he was young. Back then, the female lead and the male lead encountered the Heart of Water together. The Heart of Water had the ability to nourish the body, and Xiazhua had some talent as a water magician. Although his talent was very low, as long as he had the Heart of Water, his body would definitely improve. Although the female lead had a good impression of the male lead, the Heart of Water was a treasure. How could she give it away for someone she hadn't even met before? Later on, the female lead told the male lead that the Heart of Water was very useful to her, and she couldn't give it to the male lead's younger brother. The male lead didn't give up and kept persuading the female lead. Later on, the female lead saved the male lead again. From then on, the male lead didn't mention anything about asking for the Heart of Water for his younger brother. He only cared about being lovey-dovey with the female lead. Xiazhua's only appearance in the novel was after Elisa's death. The one who was most upset about Elisa's death was Xiazhua. In the novel, it was written that Xiazhua sent flowers to Elisa's grave and said that he hoped to be a man worthy of Elisa in his next life. After that, Xiazhua didn't appear again. He didn't appear again until the male and female lead ascended to the heavenly realm. He was simply a passerby. However, thinking of Xiazhua's infatuation, it wasn't a bad thing for Elisa to accept Xiazhua. At least she wouldn't have to step into the male lead's pit. Elisa didn't know what her two friends were thinking. She was very happy to see Xiazhua here. She took them to eat, completely forgetting about the Rue beast egg. The three of them went to a hotel and asked for a quiet private room. The three of them ordered a table of delicious food and opened 2 bottles of red wine. They ate and talked. I don't know where Big Brother Caesar is right now. I clearly heard his voice just now. I wanted to wait for him at the exit, but I didn't expect that after waiting for so long, he had already left. Elisa complained with a pout. He didn't call me to the auction house. He clearly knew that I was at Falling Jade Island, but he didn't come to see me. No matter what, we are still engaged. He doesn't take me seriously. Chapter 352. Despicable Smelly Caesar. Smelly Caesar. He clearly knows that I'm looking for him, but he doesn't show up. Does he still have me, his fiancée, in his heart? Only Elisa could be heard talking in the entire room. Elisa's alcohol tolerance wasn't good, but she insisted on drinking. Once she was drunk, she would spout nonsense. Moreover, everything she said was related to Caesar. The two people who knew Elisa's future very well sighed in their hearts at the same time. Elisa was cute and infatuated, but the heavens gave her such a sad ending. She died in the hands of the person she loved the most. As Elisa spoke, she collapsed on the table and fell into a deep sleep. It seemed that she had finally passed out from being drunk. Elisa! Irene patted her shoulder helplessly, but her hand was waved away by this little drunkard. The little drunkard turned her head and continued to sleep. Who are you? What's your purpose in getting close to Elisa? At this moment, Shozo's voice sounded in the empty room. However, his voice wasn't as gentle as usual. Instead, it had a trace of coldness. Irene was stunned. She didn't expect Shozo to suddenly ask such a question. I'm a student of the Notre Dame du Starlight. I don't have any purpose in getting close to Elisa. Elisa is a simple and cute girl. I sincerely treat her as a friend. Although Irene felt that the young man in front of her had become unfathomable, she still answered this question. In Irene's mind, she just thought that these young ladies and young masters of big families wouldn't easily trust others. He thought that she approached Elisa with the purpose of using her. She wouldn't lose anything by explaining. Regardless of whether he believed her or not, she had already explained it. It was up to him whether he believed her or not. You have the residual power of the time tunnel in your body. I'm very sure that there has never been a friend called Irene by Elisa's side. What's your purpose in getting close to Elisa? Shozo went straight to the point. Shozo didn't dare to be careless when it came to Elisa. As long as the other party revealed a little bit of malice, he would immediately kill this woman called Irene to prevent this woman from doing anything bad to Elisa. Although he was just an ordinary person, Yuan, and the housekeeper had been waiting outside for a long time. As long as he called them with his mind, they would immediately rush in and kill this woman called Irene. Irene's eyes widened. This was the first time someone could see through her so easily. Was this man really the good-for-nothing young master in the original novel? Based on her understanding of this world, the people in this world would not deviate from their original personalities. Even if the trajectory of fate changed, their personalities would never change. On the other hand, Xiaozuo's personality was clearly too different from the novel. Did someone transmigrate into Shozo's body? Could it be another guy from another world? Irene felt a headache coming on. If the other party was really a transmigrator, then it would be troublesome. Everyone knew that before transmigrating, there was no touching scene of a fellow transmigrator meeting a fellow transmigrator. As fellow transmigrators, meeting a fellow transmigrator was like a battle between two tigers. One of them was bound to be injured. She hadn't turned the tables on the female lead yet, so she didn't want to go up against this transmigrator first. The Heavenly King covers the Earth Tiger. Regardless of whether he was a transmigrator or not, she would know after trying. What did you say? Xiaozuo frowned. What did this mean? You don't understand? Then it wasn't transmigration. Could it be, you're reborn, right? Erin was shocked, very shocked. She never dreamed that this world already had two transmigrators, her and the female lead. And now there was a reincarnated person. World's consciousness, what are you trying to do? Come out and let's talk about life. What's rebirth? Xiaozuo asked in confusion. What was wrong with this woman? Why did she always say things that he didn't understand? Could it be that she wanted him to lower his guard and wait for an opportunity to strike? It's going back to the past from the future. Did you die in the future? Did you come back to take revenge? Irene was quite curious about the reborn man, since it was her first time meeting him. If transmigrators met, only one of them could survive. However, if they met a reborn person, that was not necessarily the case. Didn't you see that the main characters in those rebirth novels all had a clear goal after they were reborn? If it wasn't for revenge, then it was to lead their family out of poverty and become rich. For Xiaozuo, the second goal was definitely not applicable. That was revenge. Didn't you see that 9 out of 10 reborn people did it to take revenge on the main character? However, she still couldn't figure it out. Before the male and female lead left, Xiaozuo's family was still alive and well. So how did Xiaozuo get reborn? In the end, his family was implicated by the male lead and was pulled down from their position as a super family. However, After the rise of the male lead, they didn't rush to hug his thigh. Just based on this point, Irene had a good impression of Xiazhua and his family. Going back to the past from the future was quite similar to the description of rebirth, right? He seemed to be the reborn person she was talking about. Answer my question first. Who are you? Why do you have the energy of the time tunnel? Xiazhua didn't intend to let her ask any more questions. Well, I'm about the same as you. However, I can't do that. Tell me first, did you come back for your brother and Zicheng? Irene asked. If they had the same goal, they could work together. Irene silently thought. You know that too. Xiazhua didn't expect this woman named Irene to know so much about him. She even knew that he came back for Zicheng and his brother. It seems like our enemy is the same. If that's the case, let's work together. Irene said directly. Work together? What qualifications do you have to work together with me? Why should I believe you? Xiazhua came from a super family. How could he trust others so easily? Moreover, he didn't think that there was a need for him to work together with Irene. Although this Irene was a little mysterious, her strength wasn't very high. She didn't seem to be from a famous family either. She couldn't help him much. This so-called cooperation was only possible when both sides had similar strength. Although he was just an ordinary person, the power behind him was more than 10 Irenes. It was no wonder that Xiazhua didn't want to work with Irene. To show my sincerity, I can tell you some things about myself and Zicheng. Irene then told him about her original world, and how Zicheng was also a transmigrator. You're saying that you and Zicheng aren't from Heavenly Wind Continent. You've transmigrated from another world. And Zicheng is the son of fate of this world. He's protected by the world's consciousness. This was the first time Xiazhua heard of this. Even Zicheng's friends and admirers didn't tell him this. Perhaps even they didn't know that Zicheng wasn't from Heavenly Wind Continent. Chapter 353. Jadefall Island Master Luwuji's mansion. Father, I'm back. Lu Shui walked into the main hall with graceful steps. Luwuji was sitting in the main hall talking to his eldest daughter, Lu Xian. When he saw his eldest daughter walk in, a smile appeared on his face. You're back, sister. How does it feel to be an auctioneer for the first time? Lu Fei had seen her sister's awe-inspiring appearance on the stage today. She wanted to try out the feeling of being an auctioneer next time. What can I feel? It's just the same. Lu Shui smiled faintly and said indifferently. Shui, are you tired? If you're tired, go rest first. Luwuji was still very concerned about his daughter. An auction would take a few hours, and most people would definitely be tired to death. I'm fine, I'm not very tired. That's right, where's Big Brother? Why isn't he back yet? Lu Shui looked around. Apart from a few servants, there was no one else. Your big brother is preparing to enter the sea god's tomb. He'll be back later. Luwuji said. Father, when are you going to open the sea god's tomb? Didn't you say that there's still a key? Can we open the tomb without a key? Lu Shui gritted her teeth and said worriedly. Luwuji picked up his teacup and slowly took a sip of the fragrant tea. The third key has appeared a long time ago. I can sense that the owner of the key has already brought it to Jadefall Island. When the divine tomb opens, that person will definitely appear. The person was already here. The two sisters were stunned. They didn't expect that the third key they had been looking for so long had already been brought to Jadefall Island. Then when are we going to open the tomb? Lu Fei immediately asked impatiently. Lu Fei had long been curious about the sea god's tomb. This time, no matter what, she had to get a spot to enter. In 3 days, young Master Caesar and I will go together. The owner of the third key will definitely go. When the time comes, you two sisters will stay at home obediently. Don't even think about following us secretly. Luwuji knew his daughter very well. Lu Shui was sensible and obedient, but Lu Fei was a little headstrong. If he didn't keep her under control, no one could guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents. Lu Fei pouted. She was unhappy with her father's decision. She made up her mind that when the day came, she would definitely secretly follow them. Wherever she, Lu Fei, wanted to go, she didn't believe that anyone could stop her. Lu Shui sighed in her heart. It seemed that her younger sister was up to something again. She had better keep a close eye on Lu Fei for the next few days. She couldn't let this girl enter the sea god's tomb. and cause trouble for her father and brother. On the same day, news of Wuxia leading a group of people to the sea god's tomb spread throughout Jade Drop Island. Of course, Ming-Shi and the others were also discussing this matter in the hotel where they were staying. Have you heard? The sea god's tomb will officially open in 3 days. I also heard about it. Didn't they say that the restriction outside the divine mausoleum is so strong that even Island Lord Le can't break it? Could it be that we've finally found a formation master who can break the restriction? What? I heard that the key to the tomb of the god of sin has been found. The man who spoke revealed the latest news he had heard with a smug look. What key? This person was clearly not well informed. You don't know? My brother's best friend's younger sister's best friend just so happens to work at the Guyu auction house. Yesterday, the Guyu auction house's last auction item was the key to the sea god's tomb. Someone is willing to take out the key to the sea god's tomb for auction? Is that person crazy? If it were me, I would definitely hide the key well and take all the treasures in the sea god's tomb for myself. I say, brother, your thinking is too simple. If you want to open the sea god's tomb, you need 3 keys. You want to take the sea god's tomb for yourself with just 1 key? Dream on. So it's like that. There are actually 3 keys. Island Lord Lu said that the sea god's tomb will open in 3 days. Does that mean that all 3 keys have been gathered? How would I know? It should be. Otherwise, why would Island Lord Lu say that the sea god's tomb will open in 3 days? This was the news that Ming-Shi and the others heard when they came down to eat. After the waiter brought the food to their rooms, Ming-Shi and the others sat at the table and ate while discussing the news of the god's tomb opening in 3 days. Senior Ming-Shi, do you think that Island Lord Lu knows where the keys are? Otherwise, why would he directly say that the god's tomb will open in 3 days? Mo Gui said suspiciously. Everyone thought about it and agreed. If he didn't know where the keys were, what if the 3 keys weren't gathered in 3 days? Wouldn't that be a joke? I think so too. I've been feeling like someone has been watching us for the past 2 days. It's definitely not my imagination. It seems like we've been watched the moment we entered Jade Drop Island. Ajur said as he swallowed the meat in his mouth. The people watching us must know that Senior Ming-Shi has the keys. The only people who know about this are those who were swept into Death Island with us. Riot said. Those people have been watching us for so many days. Could it be that they want to steal the keys? Margaret said. I don't think so. If they really wanted to steal them, they would have done so long ago. They wouldn't have waited until now. Matson disagreed. Fumu looked around with her large eyes. Seeing that everyone was talking, she didn't interrupt. She opened her small mouth and ate a mouthful of roast chicken, a mouthful of meatball soup, and a croissant. She ate happily. Next to Fengwu, Little White was holding Little Yi and feeding him egg custard. Little Yi ate the steamed buns happily, occasionally reaching out to grab the food on the table. His little mouth was even drooling. He already displayed the characteristics of a foodie at such a young age. Ming-Shi and the others discussed for a long time before deciding to go take a look. The sea god's tomb would open sooner or later. Since it had to open, they couldn't avoid it even if they wanted to. In addition, Ming-Shi discovered a function of the key. It could actually sense the other 2 keys. As long as it wasn't too far away, it could roughly sense the location of the other key. He could now sense that the other 2 keys were on Jade Drop Island. He believed that the other 2 who held the keys could sense this as well. He believed that if he didn't appear when the time came, the other 2 would use the key's sensing ability to find him and force him to hand it over. Although Ming-Shi wasn't afraid of anyone, he didn't want to cause trouble. Therefore, he had to go when the tomb opened in 3 days. Those 3 days were the busiest in Jade Drop Island. Everyone was discussing the opening of the tomb, and the number of people discussing it was increasing. Many people from other factions kept flooding into Jade Drop Island for the sake of the opening of the tomb. Chapter 354. All the inns on Falling Jade Island were fully booked, regardless of whether they were big hotels or small inns. Some of the smarter natives of the island even rented 1 or 2 rooms to the adventurers who came to explore the tomb of the god of sin at the same price as the rooms in the inns. The aboriginals, on the other hand, made a small profit, which made the ordinary fisherman smile from ear to ear. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and it was soon the day of the god of Sin's tomb's opening. Early in the morning, the tomb of the god of Sin's tomb was already packed with people. These people were all here for the treasures in the tomb of the god of Sin. They all wanted to be the first to rush in and grab the treasures when the tomb of the god of Sin opened. Lu Wuji came early, but there were already many people outside the tomb of the god of Sin's tomb by the time he arrived. He didn't bring many people with him this time, but they were all experts. The 12 island masters didn't all go into the tomb of the god of Sin. Everyone knew that although the tomb of the god of Sin was full of opportunities, it was also extremely dangerous. If the 12 of them were unlucky and died inside, what would happen to Falling Jade Island? Therefore, the 12 island masters had already discussed that when the tomb of the god of Sin opened, they would send 4 of their brothers in, while the other 8 would stay outside to guard against anyone taking advantage of the opportunity to harm Falling Jade Island. In addition to the 4 island masters, Lu Wuji's son, Lu Chun, was also going in this time. The other 3 island masters also brought along one of their more capable children. In addition, they brought 50 experts with them. Although the number of people was a little less than the other major factions, it was still a good lineup. Although the number wasn't much, the quality made up for it. Not long after Lu Wuji arrived, Caesar also arrived. Beside him were Zicheng, Eve, and Rika. Rika originally didn't want to take the risk, but this was the tomb of the sea god, and she was a water magician. The temptation was too great, so she had no choice but to take the risk. Rika followed behind Zicheng with a smile on her face. Her relationship with the girls in the dormitory was very strained. Even Anika, who had always been close to her, was gradually drifting away from her. At this time, only Zicheng and Eve were willing to be friends with her, so Rika had been following Zicheng all this time. Although Zicheng's background wasn't high, and she was only the daughter of a concubine, she was treated like a goddess in school. Who knew how many male magicians who adored her? Although Rika had always thought that Zicheng wasn't bad, she wouldn't be so devoted to someone like Eve. Moreover, based on Rika's observation, Eve was almost crazy. Even if Eve and Zicheng's relationship was good, it was too abnormal for them to be so close that they were willing to die for her. It wasn't just Eve. There were also some male students who loved Zicheng's tomb. Among these people, many of them had become more and more retarded after falling in love with Zicheng. As male students, because they liked Zicheng, they mercilessly taught a lesson to the girls who talked bad about Zicheng. That crazy look was no different from a lunatic. The closer Rika got to Zicheng and the others, the more problems she discovered. Although Zicheng was really good to her, and even gave her a high-grade sensory stone, she still couldn't completely open her heart to Zicheng. This was also the reason why Zicheng felt that Rika's favorability was especially difficult to raise. If she couldn't wholeheartedly love and trust someone, how could her favorability reach 100%? Unfortunately, Zicheng didn't know how to read minds. If she knew that Rika, who had always been by her side and followed her lead, was already suspecting her, she definitely wouldn't have let Rika live. The favorability system was her biggest secret. No matter who it was, as long as they came into contact with this secret, they would definitely die. It was because she didn't know that the 2 of them could coexist peacefully. Even when they came to explore the sea god's tomb, he brought her along. In their small group, only Zicheng and the other 2 had come to explore the sea god's tomb. The others were more self-aware, and didn't want to enter this kind of place, where there was only a slim chance of survival. Kaiser had a good impression of Zicheng, so when he came to explore the sea god's tomb this time, he knew that Zicheng was also coming, so he invited her along. He didn't even mind that she had 2 burdens by her side. Lu Wuji and Kaiser's arrival made the hearts of the aristocratic families, who had been waiting for the sea god's tomb, to tremble. Now they were just waiting for the last key. As long as that key arrived, the sea god's tomb would immediately open. When that time came, there would be a lot of good things inside. When they thought about the large amounts of demonic tools, sacred tools, and divine tools inside, just thinking about it made them want to immediately rush in. If it wasn't for the restriction in front of them, these people would have rushed in long ago. Mingxi brought a jur, and the others over late. When they arrived, The sea was completely occupied by a large group of ships. They couldn't even think about passing through. Seeing the large group of ships blocking their path, Ajur didn't feel good. So many people. Although he already knew that many people would come here, he still didn't expect there to be so many people. He remembered that when the two-realm battlefield opened the sea god's tomb, there weren't so many people at that time. Ajur didn't think that the two-realm battlefield didn't open by accident this time. Before it opened, no one had time to prepare. If people knew that the sea god's tomb would open, how could there only be so few people going last time? Tens of thousands would be nothing. That's normal. The news of the sea god's tomb opening has been spreading for a while. Although the Heavenly Wind continent is big, it's not like there aren't any communication methods. This much time is enough for the aristocratic families and the royal families of various countries to send people over. Matson said. Even the royal families of various countries sent people over. Emogui didn't think that even the royal families would come. He originally thought that the people who came were from the various aristocratic families. That's for sure. Why are the four great empires so strong? Isn't it because they're descendants of gods? Another reason is that the four great empires all have divine weapons from the god realm guarding them. Although the royal families of the other countries aren't descendants of gods, they can still have divine weapons. With divine weapons, they probably think that they'll have the same status as the four great aristocratic families. Margaret said with disdain. Those countries were all thinking about how to become existences like the four great empires. If they had the time to think about other things, why didn't they think about how to govern their own countries better? You're thinking too much. Ajur sneered. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's hurry up and think of a way to get there. There are so many ships between here and the sea god's tomb. What if we can't get there? Matson said with some difficulty. At this moment, they were in a sea not far from Jade Drop Island. Below this sea was the location of the sea god's tomb. That's right. The sea god's tomb was at the bottom of the sea. If one wanted to enter the sea god's tomb, they had to enter from the bottom of the sea. The entrance was a whirlpool at the bottom of the sea. As long as one jumped into the whirlpool, they would be brought to the entrance of the sea god's tomb. Chapter 355. There were too many people waiting to jump into the whirlpool. Everyone wanted to grab a good spot, so they could get more treasures later. Just jump over, Fengwu said with a stoic expression as she chewed on her lollipop. In Fengwu's opinion, it was too easy to jump over. Couldn't they just use their qinggong? Ajur and the others were so stupid. Ajur, who didn't know that the Fengwu girl was looking down on his intelligence, nodded after hearing Fengwu's idea. He thought that it was a good idea, but it never occurred to him that if he really did that, the people on the other ships might not even let him jump over their boats. Didn't you see that someone tried to jump over, only to be knocked into the sea by a fishing pole? Some of the boats were hired by adventurers, while others were used by large families. Those who wanted to explore the tomb had already reached the central area. Those who stayed behind had only one goal: to prevent the people behind from approaching and reduce the number of opponents in front. So although jumping over was feasible, it was too much of a test of strength. Those who weren't strong enough would be knocked into the water by the guards on the boats. It would be difficult for them to get back up. Look at the people on the boats. They're all holding sticks and beating people who want to jump over. Are you sure you want to jump over? Margaret asked carefully. What does it matter? They'll be beaten up because they're weak. Xiao Wu and I will be fine, Ajur said confidently. Margaret was speechless. His words were so reasonable that she didn't know what to say. Let's go. Don't waste any more time. Let's all go together. Ajur didn't want to spend all his time chatting. Wait. At that moment, Mingxi suddenly reached out and grabbed Ajur. Ajur, Riot and Mogui, you three stay behind, Mingxi said. What? I don't want to. Senior Mingxi, it's so rare to see the opening of the sea god's tomb. I might only see it once in my life. How can you bear to not let me go? When He Gui heard that the sea god's tomb expedition that he had been looking forward to for so long was going to come to nothing, he felt extremely uncomfortable. Senior Mingxi, why won't you let us go? Riot was a little disappointed. I object. It's fine if you don't let the two of them go, But why can't you let me go? A juror, who thought of himself as a first-rate fighter, had no interest in being left behind. A juror, don't you think you're going overboard? Senior Riot and I aren't bad either. Why do you make it sound like we're dragging you down? Emogue couldn't take it anymore. These words sounded really disgusting. If not for the fact that he couldn't beat him, Emogue would have beaten him up long ago. Even Riot, who usually had a good temper, glared at a juror. Margaret thought, "You've really drawn a lot of hatred. A juror, you're a fire magician." None of us know how strong the suppression of fire magicians in the sea god's tomb is. It's too risky for you to go down there. Emogue and Riot, you're not suitable to explore the sea god's tomb with your current strength. If you want to enter the sea god's tomb, you should focus on improving your strength first. As the leader of this expedition, Mingxi always prioritized the safety of his teammates in everything he did. The trip to the sea god's tomb was full of danger. A juror's strength would definitely be suppressed. Moreover, Riot and Emogue were considered geniuses among their peers, but they were still too weak. If they went down there, Mingxi wasn't confident that he could bring them back safely. After considering all kinds of factors, Mingxi finally made the decision. Mingxi was the leader. Although they were unwilling, they had no choice but to listen to him. Margaret was very proud. She and Matson weren't forced to go down there. Wait, Senior Mingxi, what about the two of them? Why are they allowed to go? A juror looked at Margaret and her brother, unconvinced. Why were these two weaklings allowed to go, but he, an expert, couldn't? Was there any justice in this world? Mingxi looked at him strangely. A juror suddenly felt like he had asked a stupid question. The two of them aren't part of our team. It's not up to me whether they go or not. Sure enough, after hearing Mingxi's words, he realized that Mingxi really couldn't control them. Margaret made a funny face at a juror. Her expression was indescribably annoying. A juror ground his teeth. Don't think I won't beat you up just because you're a woman. Let's fight one-on-one if you dare. Of course, Margaret didn't care about the killing intent in a juror's eyes. She was in a good mood as she waved at the three pitiful fellows left on the ship. Then, she jumped into the air with Mingxi and left with a wave of her hand. A juror and the other two were thrown to the back of her mind just like that. Little Bun Fengyi was left on the ship. Originally, Fengwu had placed Fengyi in her spatial ring. Later, a juror and the others didn't want to go, so they could help take care of the child. Little Bun didn't like to be locked up in the spatial ring anyway. Since there was a nanny ready, Little Bun didn't need to go into the spatial ring. The three men became nannies again. Fortunately, Little Bun Yi wasn't the kind of kid who liked to cry. Little Bun Yi didn't cause any trouble for the three nannies. Under Mingxi's lead, the four of them easily jumped from ship to ship. It wasn't that no one wanted to hit them, but the four of them weren't weak at all. They didn't even have the chance to attack. Often, they would have already jumped over by the time they raised their hands. This speed wasn't slow at all. With the last jump, the four of them directly jumped into the whirlpool. After a moment of dizziness, the four of them appeared in front of a huge and magnificent palace. This palace was completely made of crystal. It shone with a moving luster in the sea, bringing with it endless temptation. It made people want to enter. The door of the palace was very tall. It was so tall that it made people think that the owner of this palace was a giant. There were two huge water-type magical beasts carved on the door. These two magical beasts were both water-type divine beasts. They were two identical seahorse divine beasts. Legend said that these two divine beasts used to pull the carriage for the sea god. After the sea god died, they returned to the spiritual realm. However, there will remained on this door. Without the key to open the door, no one could enter the sea god's tomb. Island Master Lu, young Master Caesar, please open this door as soon as possible. An elder of the family couldn't help but say. The others also had a greedy look. They couldn't wait to enter and search for the treasures inside. Friend, since you've come out. We're just waiting for that key of yours. Caesar suddenly shouted in the direction of Mingxi and the others. The people in that direction looked at each other. After confirming that he wasn't talking to them, they consciously retreated to the sides. When they retreated, Mingxi and the others were exposed. Chapter 356. The people in that direction all looked at each other. After confirming that the words weren't directed at them, they all consciously retreated to the sides. Once they retreated, they exposed Mingxi and the others. My friends, please work with me and Island Lord Lu to open the sea god's tomb. Kaiser looked at Mingxi and the others and cupped his hands in greeting. Please. Mingxi smiled faintly. Lu Wuji, Kaiser, and Mingxi each held a key and placed it in the corresponding groove beside the door. The door that had been as immovable as a mountain immediately let out an earth-shattering rumble after the keys were placed. After a violent tremor, the door that was several dozen meters tall slowly opened with a creak. After 5 minutes of searching, the huge door finally opened completely. A long corridor so long that one couldn't see the end of it appeared in front of everyone. A dazzling white light shone within the door. Luminous pearls hung on both sides of the corridor, illuminating the entire crystal palace like it was daytime. The doors open, the doors open. Everyone going quickly. Someone shouted. Following this impatient and excited shout, a bunch of adventurers and small clans that had already made up their minds to take advantage of this opportunity all pushed each other as they rushed through the door. In the eyes of the large clans, these people were only cannon fodder to explore the path. To them, the more they rushed forward, the more advantageous it was for them. Little Chung, let's go in quickly. Look at how many people have already gone in. Eve was a little anxious as she watched people continuously rush through the door. Rika was also a little anxious, but she didn't express her impatience when she saw that so many large clans weren't in a hurry. No hurry, let's wait a little longer. Zicheng smiled gently. When he spoke, he was still as gentle as water, as if the tomb of the god of sin in front of him couldn't attract him at all. Seeing that Zicheng didn't seem to be in a hurry, Eve didn't urge him any further and stood to the side obediently. When most of the people had entered, the large clans finally moved. The large clans all entered one after another. Kaiser led Zicheng, and the others forward slowly and calmly. After Caesar, it was Lu Wuji and the others. Lu Wuji brought his own people and followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, all the clans that hadn't shown any reaction had left. Fengwu followed Mingxi and slowly walked along the long corridor. The corridor was so long that it seemed to have no end. There were many people in front of them who had already walked very far, but they still did not seem to have reached the end. Irene, Shozo, and Elisa were walking in the crowd. Shozo and Elisa were both people of high status and had many bodyguards around them. Elisa wanted to explore the tomb of the god of sin, and Shozo and Irene couldn't stop her in time, so they had to take her with them. This trip to the tomb of the god of sin was very dangerous. Irene knew that the sea god was not a friendly god. There were endless dangers hidden in the tomb of the god of sin. If they were not careful, they could die in this place. When she read the original novel, she knew that the female lead had been to the most dangerous dungeons, and the tomb of the sea god was definitely one of them. 3 days ago, Shozo and Irene had formed an alliance. The two of them had the same enemy, Zicheng. In order to deal with Zicheng, the transmigrated female lead, and the reincarnated passerby finally joined forces. Irene told Shozo about the dangers that she would encounter in the tomb of the sea god of sin. Shozo told Irene about the world that would be destroyed because of Zicheng's selfishness more than 100 years later. Irene never thought that the female lead would cause the world to be destroyed when she took away the heart of the 5 elements. When the female lead took away the heart of the 5 elements, did she not know that the world would be destroyed because of her? She must have known. With the favorability system, it was impossible for the female lead not to know about this danger, but she still took away the heart of the 5 elements. The female lead was indeed a selfish and heartless woman. To be honest, the female lead had already become a god at that time. Why would she need something like the heart of the 5 elements? She probably sold the heart of the 5 elements directly to the system store in exchange for favorability points. Aaron had already told Xiazhua about the female lead's favorability charger. Shozo finally understood why Zicheng's friends, no matter how bad they were in the past, would immediately live and die for her after meeting her. They would not hesitate to betray the whole world for her. He had always suspected that his brother was controlled by Zicheng's ability to control people's hearts. Now it seemed that this was most likely the case. Although Irene had confirmed her alliance with Shozo, She did not intend to tell him about her Goldfinger. Instead, she told him a lot about Zicheng. Shouzo was not a person who wanted to get to the bottom of things. As long as the two of them had the same goal and Irene had no enmity towards him, he would not ask too much about Irene. Irene suspected that Shouzo also had a Goldfinger. Although she was curious about what Shouzo's Goldfinger was, she did not ask. She also did not tell Shouzo about her Goldfinger. Of course, she would not ask Shouzo what his Goldfinger was. Irene and Shouzo had already agreed that once they found the heart of the water, they would give it to Shouzo. Shouzo wanted the heart of the water because he wanted to use it to change his physique. After his physique changed, he would immediately return the heart of the water to its original world. He would not be like Zicheng, who brought destruction to this world because of his selfishness. Zicheng still did not know that two people who were hostile towards her had already joined forces. One wanted to destroy the world before she could obtain the heart of the 5 elements. The other wanted to use her as cannon fodder to kill the female lead. No matter what happened to the 3 of them, it had nothing to do with Fengwu. The Fengwu girl held a short sword in her right hand and held Mingxi's hand in her left. The 4 of them followed the main group in front of them and did not encounter any danger. The only problem now was that the corridor was too long. Since they had entered, they had already walked for half an hour, but they still had not walked out of the corridor. They could not see the end of the corridor, and did not know how long they would have to walk. Fuck, why is this road so long? How long do we have to walk? A man pointed in front and complained loudly. How would I know? Let's walk slowly. What's the rush? The other man who was walking with the man was calmer. Where does this lead to? Is there an end to it? People kept complaining that the road was too long. Unfortunately, no matter how much they complained, they could not walk to the end. They had walked for 2 hours. For 2 whole hours, not a single person in this large group of thousands walked out. As time passed, people started to get impatient. Chapter 357. What the hell was going on? Why couldn't they walk out? Could this be an illusion? Questions appeared in everyone's hearts, but no one could give them an answer. Fengwu obediently followed beside Mingxi, turning a deaf ear to the curses of the people around her. She calmly followed Mingxi and didn't say anything. On the other hand, Matson and Margaret felt restless in their hearts. Their hearts were stuffy and flustered, and they only wanted to vent. Mingxi also felt that something was wrong. He didn't think that he was an impatient person, but now, he felt extremely vexed. Fury adjusted his state of mind and calmed himself down a little. However, the others didn't have such good composure. They only felt an inexplicable anger rising in their hearts. Can you fucking walk faster? What do you mean fast? Are you rushing to reincarnate? What do you mean? Do you not want to live anymore? How dare you talk to a bitch like that? Whose bitch are you? I think you're the one who doesn't want to live anymore. You're courting death. Take this. Do you think I'm scared of you? Take this. They started a fight at the slightest disagreement. Scenes like this kept appearing, whether it was members of ordinary small families, solo adventurers, or disciples of various large worlds. All of them had a trace of hostility between their eyebrows. It was clearly a small matter, but it caused them to start a life and death battle. Zicheng secretly took a tranquil pill that he had just exchanged for. Even Rika had already started fighting with the adventurers not far away. Magic spells flew everywhere in the long corridor, and the scene of swords clashing could be seen everywhere. Everyone be careful. There's something wrong with this place. Mingxi bit his tongue hard to keep himself awake. He originally wanted to see how Fengwu was doing, but when he looked to the side, he realized that Fengwu was fine. She still had that expressionless face, and her eyes were clear. She didn't seem to be affected at all. On the other hand, Margaret and Matson's expressions were a little ugly. There was a faint trace of hostility on their faces. The two of them were still in good spirits. At the very least, they weren't like the others, who beat up everyone they saw. However, it seemed like the two of them wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Mingxi originally wanted to lead the 4 of them away from the crowd. Unfortunately, it was no longer a time where they could retreat. Those who were watching from the sidelines had already killed anyone they saw. However, in a short period of time, Many people had already been injured or lost their lives. Die. At this moment, a sword came from behind Fengwu, aiming straight for her heart. It was actually trying to kill Fengwu. Fengwu's mood had always been very calm, so when the murderous intent attacked her, she immediately knew. She stretched out her slender hand and directly clamped the sword between her two fingers. Fengwu saw the person behind her clearly the moment she turned her head. She felt that this person looked familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him before. A trace of doubt flashed through her big eyes. Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Fengwu asked. Why are you pretending to be stupid? Because of your obstruction, we lost the key to enter the tomb of the god of sin in the two-realm battlefield. It's all because of you that the Italy family suffered heavy losses. Today, I must kill you all to avenge the people of the Italy family who died. This man was Abel of the Italy family. Abel was one of the first people to receive the news of the tomb of the god of sin in the two-realm battlefield. However, before they could send the news back to the family, they were caught by the Inferno mercenary group and lost the key to enter the tomb of the god of sin. If it weren't for the key, how could the Italy family not obtain the important inheritance in the tomb of the god of sin? How could he not think of how dangerous the tomb of the god of sin was? Even if Fengwu and the others didn't stop them, the Italy family wouldn't be able to obtain anything in the tomb of the god of sin. Abel's eyes were full of hatred as he stared at Fengwu. He asked why he only looked for trouble with Fengwu and not Mingxi. The reason was very simple. Of course, it was because Fengwu looked like she was easy to bully. Mingxi had a mysterious aura that was not to be trifled with. The only person Abel wanted to kill from the beginning was Fengwu. Then he would slowly kill the people who stopped them from escaping. Even Zicheng and Irene were listed as targets. Zicheng and Irene didn't know that they had been targeted by the Italy family and the Lianya family as soon as they came near the tomb of the god of sin. The people of the two families had already discussed that after entering the tomb of the god of sin, they would kill them one by one. Even if they couldn't kill the white-haired young man, they could kill his friends to make him suffer. Also, who knew if one of them was the white-haired young man's sweetheart? Mingxi calmly kicked Abel in the stomach and sent him flying with his sword. You only dare to attack women. What a despicable person. Mingxi smiled slightly, but the words he said were as cold as the winter wind. Don't be complacent. Everyone come out. Let's kill these guys together. Abel didn't do a sneak attack anymore. Since sneak attacks didn't work, he would use the human wave tactic to kill the four of them together. Margaret and Matson, what does this have to do with us? Margaret and Matson were unlucky and were directly killed. The two of them also became the targets of Abel and the others. After Abel roared, more than 30 swordmasters in their swordsman suits appeared from the crowd. They were all hired by Abel, and each of them was paid. This was because the person leading the team this time was the second elder of their family. The second elder had always been a person who prioritized the overall situation. He wouldn't use the family's connections for the grudges of the younger generation. Since he couldn't get any help from his family, he had to find his own way to get people. Although he had to spend a lot of money, as long as he could kill Mingxi and the others, he would be able to vent a lot of his anger. As long as he could vent his anger, spending a little money was nothing to Abel. Originally, Abel didn't want to make a move so soon, but now he wanted to kill people. The people he wanted to kill were undoubtedly Mingxi and the others. This was why he brought people to seek revenge. Kill! The group of people's eyes were red with killing intent. They rushed towards Mingxi and the others, shouting to kill them. Fengwu pulled out her short sword with one hand and used her other hand to block the sword that was aimed at her chest. Then she kicked out, sending that person flying and pressing down on a group of people who were about to attack from behind. Ah! The person who was kicked away screamed, and then his whole body fell on the people behind him. The people behind him were pressed down so hard that they almost vomited the food from last night. Chapter 358. Mingxi held a silver-white ancient sword in his hand. The patterns on the sword looked very mysterious. He pulled out the long sword elegantly, with a flash of silver sword light. The two people who pounced on him died under his sword. Mingxi wasn't a saint. If people wanted to kill him, He wouldn't be merciful and leave them a way out. Since they wanted to kill, they had to be prepared to be killed. Mingxi killed 2 people with 1 strike. Matson and Margaret weren't bad either. One was a mage, and the other was a sword master. One was in charge of defense, and the other was in charge of offense. The group of adventurers that Abel found was caught off guard. In a short while, 3 people had died at their hands. Fengwu didn't show any mercy either. She stabbed the people who pounced on her. If she didn't kill them, they would keep pouncing on her. The Fengwu girl was annoyed. Abel brought more than 30 people, but they all died under the swords of Mingxi and the others. After Margaret and Matson killed the last adventurer, they walked towards Abel, who was already scared stiff. "I'll fight it out with you." He raised his sword. He didn't even think about running away. Instead, he raised his sword and rushed towards Margaret. Did he really think that women were easier to bully? Margaret shot out a seed and cast a spell. The seed grew very quickly, and eventually, it turned into a sturdy vine-like plant. It wrapped around Abel's body tighter and tighter, until he died of suffocation. "Done." Margaret clapped her hands. "That's strange. Where did Mingxi and Xiaowu go?" Matson suddenly realized that his 2 companions, who had been fighting together, had suddenly disappeared. He was shocked. When did the 2 of them leave? How come he and Margaret didn't notice? Where are they? Where did they go? Margaret was also shocked. Mingxi and Fengwu weren't people who would leave their companions behind and run away. So the question was, where did they go? They didn't have to think for long before they knew the answer. A red light suddenly appeared and surrounded the siblings. Under the red light, the 2 of them disappeared. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of waves kept ringing in Fengwu's ears. She opened her eyes and saw that the corridor was gone. Instead, a vast ocean appeared before her eyes. Fengwu did not know what had happened. She only remembered that she was clearly killing enemies. As she was killing, a light surrounded her. When she opened her eyes again, she had already appeared in this place. This was an isolated island. Not far from her, there were many people who had arrived earlier than Fengwu, or were appearing. They all came to this place inexplicably. They didn't even know how they got here. The surrounding people were all on guard, carefully guarding against others. Once they entered the tomb of the god of sin, everyone was an opponent, and no one could be trusted easily. "Miss, may I go with you?" A voice that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze suddenly sounded. Fengwu turned her head and saw a thin man standing beside her. The man's appearance was not very handsome in the eyes of this continent, but he was delicate and good-looking. In addition, his voice and clear eyes added points to his appearance, making it impossible for people to dislike him. Fengwu stared at the man for 3 seconds and came to a conclusion. This person was not annoying. The Fengwu girl's intuition was very sharp. She could mostly tell whether a person was good or bad. Fengwu didn't have a good feeling about this man, but he was not a bad person. "Okay." Fengwu nodded. She didn't feel any pressure at all. The young man was stunned. He didn't expect Fengwu to agree so easily. The young man had thought of 100 reasons to persuade the other party to agree to take him with her. But he didn't expect that the 100 reasons would not be used at all. The other party agreed so easily. This made Xiazhua feel that he, who had always been a playboy, was a bit stupid. Not only did Xiazhua not expect Fengwu to agree so easily, the people standing not far from the 2 also didn't expect that they would have to worry about being stabbed in the back at this time. Unless they were already acquaintances, who would ally with an unfamiliar stranger. They all thought that Fengwu would not agree. That young man's strength was weak. There was no benefit in allying with him, and they would have to spend time to protect him. It was not worth it at all. However, the Fengwu girl agreed just like that. Moreover, she agreed without any reluctance. This made the surrounding people feel that they couldn't understand. Should they say that this girl was simple or stupid? "Thank you." Xiazhua was slightly stunned, but he sincerely thanked her. Xiazhua was originally protected by the butler, Yuan, and some guards. But after the chaotic battle, the people around him gradually disappeared. Xiazhua, who had been standing at the side watching the chaotic battle, noticed something. Every person who killed 9 people would be surrounded by a red light and be teleported away. The people who were originally protecting him were all teleported away, when he killed the 9th person. With Irene's help, he finally killed 9 people with his own hands, and was teleported out. Elisa and Irene were still in that place before he was teleported out. He didn't know how they were doing. Xiazhua was a bit worried, but he also knew that if she was with Irene, Elisa would most likely be fine. As a transmigrator, Irene definitely had her own means of self-protection. As a princess, Elisa had brought many good things with her. Even if she had a detonation scroll, he believed that she could easily kill 9 people and be teleported out. Among all of them, the only one who could possibly be in danger was himself. Thinking about it, it was really depressing. This feeling of depression only lasted for a few seconds before it was forgotten by Xiazhua. He was the Xiazhua who had experienced 100 years of turmoil. He was no longer the young Xiazhua, who would be sad for half a day, because of a few words from others. No need to thank me. I don't hate the feeling you give me. Fengwu tilted her head and said. Xiazhua chuckled. He originally wanted to team up with Fengwu, because she was the young Moon King's friend. Someone who could become friends with Moon King definitely wouldn't be a treacherous person. Now he admired this girl. He didn't believe that with her strength, she couldn't see that he didn't have any abilities. He didn't have any do qi or magic. He was just a normal person. Yet, she agreed to let him follow her so easily because he didn't hate it. This girl looked like a clear-minded person. He liked to interact with people like this, because he wasn't a complicated person. Chapter 359. Perhaps it was because Fengwu's aura had always been very pure, so she could judge whether a person was good or bad based on their aura. For example, when facing Zicheng, many people said that Zicheng was a kind and gentle woman, but Fengwu couldn't have a good impression of her, because she gave Fengwu a very complicated feeling. Fengwu didn't like her because her aura was very messy. Of course, Fengwu wouldn't ignore someone because she didn't like their aura. She just couldn't see Zicheng as a friend. Similarly, Irene gave Fengwu a strange feeling. When she looked at people, there was often something in her eyes that others couldn't understand. Fengwu didn't care what it was in her eyes, but she also didn't want to be friends with her. Although they had experienced danger together and spent some time together, their relationship couldn't be compared to Elena and the others. To Fengwu, they were just 2 classmates that she knew. Therefore, Fengwu girl was a girl who believed in her feelings. Xiazhua gave her a good impression, so she didn't hesitate to accept him as an ally. However, did Fengwu girl understand the meaning of an ally? The answer was of course no. She now only saw this young man as a friend that she could make. In times of danger, she didn't mind protecting this young man. I'm Xiazhua. Xiazhua smiled slightly. I'm Fengwu. Fengwu's face was still expressionless. After exchanging names, the 2 of them were considered to have formed an alliance. Beside them, the people who had also arrived on this small island were also looking for acquaintances who had come together. A few of them had already formed an alliance with acquaintances. However, most of them were alone at the side. They didn't feel safe leaving their backs to strangers. More and more people came to the island. In a short time, there were already hundreds of people standing on the island. Xiazhua estimated that there were at least 200 people on the island. Gradually, no one was teleported over. After half an hour, no one was teleported over. Everyone had guessed that the teleportation had stopped. There were many people who entered the sea god's tomb. Even if most of them died in the corridor, there were definitely more than 200 people left. Where were the others? Where were they teleported to? Was there more than one place like this? Then why were they separated? Did they want to be tested separately? When Aaron told her about the important things to take note of in the sea god's tomb, she said that it was very strange. Even Zicheng, who was protected by the world's consciousness, was almost in danger. Ordinary people would be in great danger if they entered. Irene advised him to give up on entering this place. Because he was determined to obtain the heart of water, he ignored Irene's advice and insisted on coming to this place. Where was Irene at the moment? She was also on an island, and Elisa was with her. Both of them were worried about Shouzo's safety. Irene was cursing Xiaz. Author, come out if you have the ability. I won't beat you to death. Irene originally thought that she had read the original work. Although she knew how dangerous the sea god's tomb was, She didn't take it to heart. But what was going on now? Why did the way to clear the dungeon change? Yes, everything Irene experienced was different from the original work. Even the way to enter the sea god's tomb had changed. In the original work, the sea god's tomb appeared, but only 2 keys were found. No one knew where the last key was. So when the sea god's tomb was opened, Wuxia, the male lead Caesar, and a few influential figures of the big families used their power to find powerful array masters to break the restriction outside the door. After a month of hard work and gathering the wisdom of 100 array masters, they finally opened the door outside. Just when everyone thought that they could enter the sea god's tomb, the mythical beast carved on the door came to life. Then a massacre began. The mythical beast's consciousness would kill everyone who entered the sea god's tomb, except for those who had the keys. It was a fierce battle. The powerful swordsmen and magicians were unable to resist the power of the mythical beast, and were torn into pieces. Too many people had died in that battle. Although the mythological beast's consciousness had been wiped out by the people present at the time, there were only a few people who had survived. Those who survived either joined Wuxia's camp or Caesar's camp, and entered the sea god's tomb together. The adventure that followed was different from what they had experienced. Could it be that the dungeon was different because the 3 keys were gathered this time? Originally, when she came, she did not know that the 3rd key had appeared. She had made up her mind that if it was really like what was written in the book, and they had to use 100 array masters to break through the restriction, then she would quickly retreat with Shozo and the others. When the 2 mythical beasts guarding the door were destroyed, she would then join Zicheng's team and enter together with them. She did not expect that when the 3 keys were gathered this time, everyone would successfully enter the sea god's tomb. It was not like what was written in the book, where the sea god's tomb only opened after most people died. The more Irene thought about it, the more her head hurt. The memories in her mind were no longer of much help to her. It seemed like she could only rely on herself in the future. Irene did not know that in the original book, Zicheng did not enter the sea god's tomb through the normal way. In addition, the mythical beasts guarding the door were already dead, so the dangers after entering the sea god's tomb were smaller. No one knew that all the tests in the sea god's tomb were controlled by the wills of the 2 mythical beasts. After losing control of their consciousness, they didn't encounter anything scary except for 1 or 2 instance dungeons. Zicheng's encounter with the Heart of Water was much simpler. But now, such a good thing was impossible. If Zicheng and the others entered the dungeon in normal difficulty, after collecting all 3 keys, they would be able to unlock both hard and nightmare difficulty dungeons. As for who would be unlucky enough to encounter the nightmare dungeon, that would depend on the will of the heavens. The sea was covered with dark clouds, and the strong winds were constantly blowing on people's bodies, making them feel cold and painful all over. People began to feel restless. Everyone was in a dilemma. What should they do next? Should they stay on the island and wait for the next development? Or should they boldly leave the island and take a look outside? This was a difficult choice to make. It would be good if they made the right choice, but if they made the wrong choice, they might encounter the most fatal danger. Everyone was waiting to see who would make the first move, but because everyone had the same idea, no one made a decision first. Chapter 360. At this moment, the dark clouds in the sky suddenly moved. The dark clouds in the sky began to change, and finally turned into a few large words. No matter what method you use, go to the opposite island. If you pass, you can proceed to the next stage. If you fail, you will die. These words were only displayed for a short 30 seconds. Although it wasn't long, it was enough for everyone to clearly see what those words meant. They want us to go to the opposite island. The waves are so strong now, how are we going to get there? Someone complained. Even if we can't, we still have to go. If we fail, we will die here. Someone spat out fiercely with a gloomy face. Fortunately, I brought a flight scroll. I'm definitely going to pass this stage. After saying that, that person took out a scroll from his spatial ring. It was the flight scroll that person had mentioned. That person opened the scroll and activated the array on it. The flight scroll immediately wrapped around him and sent him up into the sky. The man was flying against the sea breeze, and soon, He had covered half the distance. The island on the other side was not far from him. Unexpectedly at this time, the small black whirlwind in the sky bumped into the man. Ah! After a miserable scream, that person's body was twisted into pieces and turned into a pile of blood that splashed into the sea. Not a single bone was left behind. Gee! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. This kind of small whirlwind was only the size of a normal person's head. Who would have thought that such an inconspicuous thing could make someone die so miserably without leaving behind a corpse? Looks like we can't go through the sky. Someone sighed in shock. Going through the water is not necessarily safe either. Let me try. A bold man circulated his do-chi to his feet and stepped on the water surface, wanting to use this method to walk over directly. He did not expect that he would fall into the water the moment he stepped on it. The man climbed up with an ugly expression. A few short-sighted people thought that this man's skills were not good enough and could not even do something as simple as walking on water. Among them, there was no lack of discerning people who could see the problem with a single glance. This man's strength was not weak at all. It was impossible for him to make such a mistake. There was only one possibility for such a thing to happen, and that was that the water was not a single strand and could absorb the energy in a person's body. Another water magician tried to use water magic, and the result was the same. This time, those who were laughing at others couldn't laugh anymore. They weren't idiots. And even those who didn't know what was going on knew that something was wrong. This was great. There were so many small whirlwinds flying in the sky, and anyone who touched them would die. Furthermore, the water had the ability to suppress all powers. Unless they relied on their physical strength to swim across. But who knew if there would be something as terrifying as the mini whirlwind in the water? For a moment, everyone was frowning. However, it wasn't as if there weren't any smart people. After some people discovered this situation, they simply cut down trees on the island to make rafts. This idea undoubtedly opened everyone's minds. That's right. Even if they couldn't use magic or combat chi, they could still make a boat or a raft and row over by themselves. This time, everyone started to act. Fengwu and Ajur were no exception. The two of them decided to build a canoe. There were only two of them, so they didn't need to make the canoe too big. It was fine as long as it could hold the two of them. Fengwu didn't have the slightest bit of experience in building a canoe. Fortunately, there was Shozo beside her. Shozo was an otaku for more than 100 years, and he learned a lot of things. As long as he was interested in a book, he would read it. When the conditions were good enough, he would find a professional to teach him one-on-one. For a period of time, Shozo was very interested in building a boat, and he even specially invited a professional boat master to teach him for a period of time. Shozo took out a blueprint from his space ring and scribbled on a piece of paper. Finally, he designed a canoe that met the two's requirements. Shozo was just an ordinary person without any abilities. Asking him to do physical labor was undoubtedly a dream. Therefore, Fengwu went to the forest alone and cut down a huge tree. The trees here also didn't have the slightest consciousness. Perhaps the environment here made them unable to develop their own consciousness. Fengwu walked in the forest, and other than a piece of dead silence, she couldn't feel anything else. After cutting down a huge tree, under Shozo's instructions, Fengwu started to build a boat with her small sword. When the people who were busy building rafts and boats saw a girl like Fengwu busying herself, while a man like Shozo was giving orders, they didn't hesitate to give Shozo a disdainful look. These people all thought of Shozo as a useless gigolo who could only rely on women to survive, and Fengwu as a kind and pitiful girl. At the same time, they also felt that Fengwu was a little stupid. Why was she working so hard for a man she didn't know? She should just kick this man out. It was better than letting a useless man give orders by her side. In the hearts of these onlookers, Fengwu and Shozo were two people who were bound to die. One was a useless ordinary person, and the other was a young girl. How strong could a girl of this age be? At most, she would only have the strength of a mid-level swordmaster. Therefore, it wasn't very likely that they wouldn't die. How could Shozo not notice the eye-catching gazes of these people? However, at this moment, he was indeed a little useless. He was already used to being looked down upon by others, and it was hard for him to feel hurt because of this. No matter how fragile his heart was, after being laughed at for over 100 years, it was hard for him to be touched by others' mockery. Unlike the others, Fengwu's reaction was different. In the eyes of the Fengwu girl, Shouzo was very powerful. He could draw the design in such detail, and when he talked about how to build a ship, he was like a master. He could answer Fengwu's questions. If Fengwu didn't understand something at the moment, he could explain it until she understood it. And no matter how difficult Fengwu's question was to answer, he could use a way that Fengwu could understand to answer Fengwu. Fengwu looked at Shouzo with a face full of adoration. Shouzo felt very embarrassed. This was the first time someone looked at him with adoration, because of such a small matter. Others would only say, "So what if you know a lot about these miscellaneous subjects? You are a useless person who can't become a sword master or a magician. Even if you become a great scholar, you are destined to be an ordinary person with a short life." Fengwu, on the other hand, worshipped him because he knew these things that ordinary people knew. What an interesting girl. Time passed quickly. Everyone was building the ship silently. In a moment on the beach, boats of all shapes and sizes came out one after another. Some people directly hollowed out the body of a big tree and used it as a boat. Some people used the vines on the island to wrap around the tree and made a wooden raft. Chapter 361. Time passed quickly. Everyone was building their boats in silence. For a time, boats of all shapes and sizes appeared on the beach. Some people directly hollowed out the body of a big tree and used it as a boat. Some people used the vines on the island to wrap around the tree and made a wooden raft. Among all the boats, there were some that were well built and some that were not. Fengwu's boat was undoubtedly the best. The boat was well planned and even had a sail installed on the boat. Among the non-mainstream boats, this boat was simply too classy. If Fengwu's boat was a branded product, then the majority of the boats were just cheap goods that cost 90 yuan. "Hey kid, hand over your boat. I'm a magnanimous person, and will use our boat to exchange for yours. You don't have to be too grateful." A burly man appeared in front of Xiazhua. Xiazhua frowned and looked at the burly man who was holding a large knife and staring at him with an unfriendly expression. Fengwu frowned at the same time. She took a few steps forward and stared at the burly man with her black eyes. There was no fear in her eyes. "No, it's ugly." Fengwu rejected him directly. She even pointed at the burly man's boat and gave them the word ugly. The burly man's boat was indeed ugly. There was only a hole in the boat with a knife. The hole was not smooth, and it would be uncomfortable to sit inside. Moreover, they did not know if the boat would sink. Looking at the boat made them feel insecure. The burly man's act of exchanging boats seemed to have reminded the others. Yes, it did not matter if they did not make a good boat. As long as someone else made a good boat, it would be fine. With that thought, a round of exchanging boats was actually snatching boats. Although most of the boats did not seem to have been certified, there were some that were better. But was exchanging boats so easy? Other than a few cannon fodders who overestimated themselves, the rest were true experts. Experts would often fight with each other. That's right. Before these ships could go out to conquer the sea, they would have to fight over the ships. And Fengwu had already started fighting. Yes, they started fighting. After being criticized by Fengwu, the man couldn't help but rush towards Fengwu with his sword. This man wasn't an ordinary person. He had killed countless people. His main job was a pirate, and his secondary job was a bandit. Both his main job and secondary job were related to the word bandit. Moreover, this man had a habit. Every time he stole something from others, he would never leave anyone alive. If he encountered a woman, he would send her on her way. If he encountered a man, he would kill him with a single slash. This time, he saw that Fengwu and Xiaozua's team were very easy to bully, so he wanted to forcefully take their ship. If they were outside, he would not have forcefully taken their ship. Instead, he would have killed them and taken their ship. When Fengwu saw the man slashing towards her with his sword, her eyes flashed. Then she lifted her leg. Without even using her sword, she kicked the man, who was as thick as a bear, and sent him flying. The man flew for a full 5 meters in the air before stopping. As soon as he stopped, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Those who originally wanted to rob Fengwu's team saw this scene, and their eyes flashed. They felt that it was better to rob someone else. This girl didn't seem to be easy to deal with. After a full 30 seconds, Xiazhua finally recovered from Fengwu's fast and almost invisible kick. So powerful. Fengwu must be a legendary genius, Xiazhua thought blankly. While they were busy snatching the ships, many people had already chosen to go out to sea. There were many oddly shaped boats floating on the sea. There were also a few daring people who chose to fly in the sky. The danger in the sky came from those omnipresent small whirlwinds. If one could avoid those whirlwinds, there would be no danger. Fengwu and Xiazhua pushed the boat into the sea. The two of them boarded one after another, and used the oars they made to row towards the opposite island. The wind on the sea was getting stronger and stronger. Some of the boats and rafts that were originally built like tofu crumbled when the wind came. If the boat didn't capsize, then the logs would fall apart. The two brothers who built the raft were also eccentric people. After the raft fell apart, the two of them reacted quickly. They each hugged a log and prepared to swim to the opposite shore. See, I was right. We should build a raft. Even if it falls apart, we won't be afraid. We can still swim over with the logs. Boss, you're right. This little brother's admiration for you is like the endless waves of the river. Two amusing idiots. Everyone who passed by rolled their eyes at them. At the same time, they regretted it. If they had known, they would have built a raft too. The wind is too strong. Xiazhua was a little uneasy. Even if they built a good boat, it didn't mean that they would be able to row to the opposite shore. He believed that this wouldn't be so easy. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. Fengwu looked at Xiazhua seriously and said. Knowing that Xiazhua didn't have much fighting power, Fengwu had already decided to protect this new friend of hers after the boat-building incident. Xiazhua was a little touched when he heard that. Although it seemed quite useless to let a girl protect him, it was the first time he heard that a friend didn't despise him and even wanted to protect him. This feeling was quite good. Okay. Xiazhua smiled. Fengwu and the others could be said to be in front of everyone because they made the sail. However, as the wind increased, the boat became extremely unstable. It swayed, and there was a danger of capsizing at any time. At this time, Xiazhua asked Fengwu to lower the sail, and the two of them rowed even harder. They were already not far from the opposite island. As long as they worked harder, they would have a chance to row over. Most of the boats behind Fengwu and the others had capsized. Some of them were lucky enough to find a piece of wood and could swim over, while others were unlucky. They could only rely on their own physical strength to cross this hurdle. The sea was blown up by the wind, and the waves gradually grew stronger. Everyone was like little ants struggling to survive in the waves. A huge wave came, and everyone's boat was capsized. Fortunately, Fengwu and the others weren't far from the shore. As long as they persevered and swam against the wind and waves, they would be fine. However, it was easier said than done. The two of them who fell into the water wanted to swim over. But every time they swam forward, another wave would hit them. Not only did the distance between them and the island not shorten, but it also increased. Persevering in the wind and waves was a very exhausting task. Xiazhua's physical strength wasn't good to begin with. He no longer had the strength to swim forward. He was unwilling to give up. He hadn't stopped Zicheng yet. He couldn't die. He carried the hope of all living things in the future. He couldn't die here. Chapter 362. Persevering in the wind and waves was a very exhausting task. Xiazhua's stamina was not good to begin with, and he no longer had the strength to swim forward. He was unwilling to give up. He had not stopped Zicheng, and he could not die. He carried the hope of all living beings in the future, and he could not die here. He was unwilling to give up, but his stamina was depleting faster and faster. His hands could not swim anymore, and his body slowly sank. Just when Xiazhua thought he was going to be drowned by the sea, his body was suddenly lifted up. Cough, cough. This was a piece of wood from the wooden raft. Xiazhua was finally saved in the wind and waves. He opened his tired eyes and saw Fengwu girl's worried eyes. Cough cough. I'm fine, don't worry. In the wind and waves, he did not know if Fengwu could hear him, but he did not have the strength to scream. Fengwu nodded and supported Xiazhua firmly on a piece of wood. Xiazhua was only a person, and it was not easy for him to persevere in the wind and waves for so long. Fengwu slapped the surface of the water and pushed the piece of wood that was carrying Xiazhua forward. Although the wind and waves were very strong, they would always be pushed further away. Fengwu continued to swim forward. Behind them, many people had exhausted their stamina and sank to the bottom of the sea forever. Only a few strong people were like Fengwu, and they swam forward with all their might against the wind and waves. Fortunately, the wind did not blow for long. 20 minutes later, the wind stopped, and the waves disappeared. Those who were still alive finally reached the opposite island. Ha! Ha! Xiazhua was dragged to the shore by Fengwu, and he could not stop panting. The sky was still dark, but the sea had returned to its usual calmness. So cold, after going through such a storm, his clothes were completely soaked. His clothes stuck to his body, and the cold made him shiver. At this time, the space beside him suddenly lit up. Now that he had reached the shore, he could use his ability again. Fengwu opened the space ring and found the flint inside. The flint was a tool for heating and lighting. As long as magic or do-chi was injected into it, the flint would burn like fire. Not only could it be used for lighting, it could also be used for heating. After the flint was ignited, Xiazhua felt his body gradually warming up. He had finally recovered some of his strength. He walked behind a large rock and changed into dry clothes. Fengwu had already changed her clothes and was sitting by the fire. She was looking at the island while warming herself. This was a small island with good scenery. There were many fruit trees growing on the island. They were all wild fruits that had never been seen before. Each and every one of them was very attractive, making people want to pick them and taste them. However, the group that had just stepped onto the island did not pick the fruits. It was best not to eat these unknown fruits. Who knew if they were poisonous? Before crossing the sea, there were more than 200 people who were still alive. After crossing the sea, less than 50 people came down. Most of them had died in the sea. Xiazhua sat beside Fengwu and warmed himself by the fire. He ate some of the chicken and bread that Fengwu had given him. He finally felt better, and his strength was recovering. Thank you, Fengwu. If it weren't for you, I would have died here like those people. Xiazhua was very grateful to Fengwu for saving his life. He did not know why he had never seen Fengwu beside Moon King in his previous life. He guessed that she might have encountered something that caused her to die prematurely. In this life, Fengwu had saved him. He would not let Fengwu die. He had to protect this girl and keep her alive. Xiazhua made up his mind. He had to keep Fengwu alive so that she could escape the fate of dying prematurely. No need to thank me. We are companions. Fengwu looked at him seriously. When she agreed to team up with Xiazhua, she treated Xiazhua as her companion. If her companion was in trouble, she had to help. Xiazhua thanked her so gratefully. Fengwu was not used to it. Yes, we are companions. Xiazhua smiled. Although his smile was weak, it was still as pure as a spring. The people who were still alive were adjusting themselves and resting. They were preparing to face the danger of the next stage. However, after waiting for 2 hours, the announcement that the second stage had begun did not appear. In order to get to this island, everyone was very tired. However, because they did not understand the situation on the island and were wary of the people around them, no one dared to sleep. The people who were still alive were meditating and cultivating their fighting aura. No one spoke. Everyone was preparing for the second stage. At the same time, they were also wary of the people around them. Those who were able to survive until now were all absolute powerhouses. Among them, there were even a few people who flew over from the sky. Those who chose the path of the sky were all magicians. Magicians had poor physical strength. If an accident happened in the water, they would lose their magic and be unable to rely on their physical strength to reach the other side. Some magicians who saw the reality clearly chose to fly over from the sky to fight for that slim chance of survival. Fengwu was not interested in other people. She closed her eyes and took a nap. She didn't know how much time had passed when the earth suddenly shook violently. The island suddenly split into two halves. In the middle of the island, a long flight of stairs appeared. The stairs went straight underground, but it was pitch black. It was impossible to see what was at the bottom of the stairs. At this time, a large word suddenly appeared on the ground. Enter the second stage from here. There were only these few words. There was nothing else. Even the requirements to pass the stage weren't written. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. A relatively courageous swordsman was the first to go down. Following that, there were people who went down one after another. Xiazhua didn't care about the difference between men and women. He pulled on Fengwu's sleeve and followed the flow of people down. From the beginning of the first stage, it was different from the way Irene said it would be to pass the stage. He was certain that Irene didn't deceive him. As such, there was only one possibility. Because of some reason, the future had changed. Right now, he didn't have the slightest certainty that the heart of water was still in its original place. All he could do was take one step at a time. This long flight of stairs made his hair stand on end. He felt that regardless of whether he walked in front or at the back, it would be very dangerous. Only walking in the middle might be somewhat safer. Thus, he ignored etiquette and pulled on Fengwu to insert himself in the middle. After inserting himself in the middle of the line, Xiazhua immediately let go of Fengwu's sleeve. The expression on his face was somewhat apologetic. However, Fengwu didn't have time to pay attention to this trivial matter. After the stairs leading underground appeared, Fengwu's eyes showed a trace of graveness. Chapter 363. The scene in front of her changed again. Everyone else's vision was pitch black, but hers was a sea of red as blood. Fengwu knew that this was called killing intent. A place with killing intent must have had a large number of deaths, and those people must have died very miserably. Fengwu had only seen a place with so much killing intent in a small town not far from the two-realm battlefield. This place is dangerous. Even Fengwu felt a sense of danger. She blinked and grabbed Xiaozua's hand that had already let go. Looking at Xiaozua's slightly red face, she said seriously, "Don't let go, it's dangerous." "Xiaozua is too weak. I have to protect him," Fengwu girl thought seriously. "Oh," Xiaozua replied weakly. When Fengwu suddenly grabbed his hand, he was a little embarrassed. Xiaozua had lived for 2 lifetimes, but he had never held hands with a girl. In his previous life, because of Elise's death, he had never married and had always focused on his studies. He had been a bachelor for 100 years. Only now did he realize that a girl's hand was so soft and gentle. It was different from a guy's hand. Xiaozua was not narcissistic enough to think that Fengwu was interested in him, just because she took the initiative to hold his hand. He knew what kind of talent he had. In Heavenly Wind, the strong were respected. No matter what a powerful girl like Fengwu said, he would not think that she was interested in him. The further down they went, the darker it became. Some people had already taken out magic tools to light up the place. There were pearls that could light up in the dark, and there were also magic tools that looked like torches. With these magic tools, the originally pitch-black stairs finally had some light. Under the bright light, they could see that the long stairs led to a very far place. There were 2 stone walls on both sides of the stairs. The stairs were just enough for 2 people to walk side by side. There were more than 40 of them, so they could walk side by side. The stone stairs were very old, and there was a thick layer of dust on it. As they walked, cobwebs would occasionally obstruct their progress. They had to stop and clean up before continuing. The group of more than 40 people walked for half an hour, before finally reaching a flat surface. "Why are there so many dead people?" someone exclaimed. "Isn't this the sea god's tomb? Why are there so many skeletons in the sea god's tomb? Who are these people? Everyone be careful. Something's wrong with this place." Everyone was on guard. In front of them, there were many skeletons that had already turned into white bones. Judging from the skeletons, they should be ordinary humans. There were no records of the sea god's tomb being opened before. So where did these human skeletons come from? It should be said that in an unopened tomb, it was a very inconceivable thing for so many skeletons to appear. These white bones were as bright and clean as jade. They were unbelievably white, causing people to feel a chill run down their backs. Many people felt their scalps go numb as they looked at these white bones. It was not that they had never seen white bones before, but it was very rare to see such white bones. It could be said that they had never seen such white bones before. It's gone. Look, the stairs are gone. Someone shouted in panic. Everyone turned around, and sure enough, the long flight of stairs that should have been behind them had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only an empty stone wall. How could this be? The person who spoke took a big step forward and felt around the stone wall. The feeling from his hand told him that this was not an illusion. The stairs had really disappeared. There's no other way. We can only continue forward. Someone took a deep breath and said, yes, there was no way out now. If they wanted to live, they could only continue forward until they left this place. Everyone calmed their restless emotions and began to slowly walk towards the passage in front of them. This passage was much wider than the stairs from before. It would not be crowded even if 3 people were to walk in parallel. This passage was the same as the stairs. There was a thick layer of dust piled up there, and a footprint would be left behind when one stepped on it. After getting rid of the cobwebs in front of them, everyone slowly moved forward. The unknown danger ahead made everyone on high alert, and they did not dare to relax. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of water dripping was very clear in this silent passage. At the same time, it made people feel even more uneasy. This uneasiness spread in everyone's hearts. After swallowing a mouthful of saliva, they carefully moved forward. There's the sound of water in front. It seems that we're about to leave this passage. Someone whispered to his companion next to him. In such a quiet environment, no matter how soft one's voice was, it was no different from speaking loudly. Even if one did not want to listen, the sound would automatically enter one's ears. Don't relax. I keep feeling that the real danger is about to come, that person's companion said with a serious face. That person nodded, indicating that he would not relax. In this place, only those who did not want to live would relax. Although no one else responded to this man, in everyone's hearts, the same thought existed. The real danger was getting closer and closer. The more they walked forward, the stronger the uneasiness. Although they were uneasy, no one dared to stop. It was as if a voice was telling them that they could not stop. They could not stop. If they stopped, they would die. With heavy steps, more than 40 people carefully walked forward. In front of the passage, there was a trace of light, but no one dared to run over alone. Everyone walked forward. The more they walked, the closer they got to the hole that was emitting light. Finally, they reached the hole. Xiazhua held Fengwu's hand. His palms were sweating profusely. His heart was so nervous that it almost jumped out of his throat. This was the tragedy of being weak. He could not even protect himself. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. Fengwu seemed to feel something. She reached out a hand and patted Xiazhua's head. When she was young, when she was uneasy and afraid, her master would pat her head like this to comfort her. Xiazhua stared blankly at Fengwu. Did she just pacify him? Let's go in and take a look. After standing at the entrance for 5 minutes, someone decided to go all out with the idea of dying early. Indeed, we have no choice but to go in. There's no other way for us to go. Someone sighed. They had no other choice. Everyone took out their weapons and held them in their hands. They were ready to fight to the death. Just as everyone was about to move forward, a voice suddenly came from behind. What the hell is this place? It's so gloomy. Why am I in this broken place? Hearing this, everyone immediately turned their heads. They saw a small magical beast that looked like a teacup hound. It opened its eyes wide and looked around in disbelief. This little guy was so skinny that it did not have much meat. There was even a white eggshell on its head. Its whole body was yellow in color. It looked really good. Chapter 364. The little guy was so skinny that it didn't have much meat on it. It had a white eggshell on its head, and its entire body was yellow in color. It didn't look good at all. Baby! Fengwu was shocked to see this little guy appear. She didn't think that this little guy could come out of the space ring by itself. This was something that had never happened before. This yellow creature that looked like a teacup dog was the ancient wise beast that Fengwu got at the auction. This little guy kept calling me baby. Fengwu later found out that this guy was really called baby. After getting baby, Fengwu used the power of the pure sword to purify the demonic aura on its body. Baby finally returned to its original appearance. It was a pity that it had been tortured by the demonic aura for too long. It would take a long time for it to fully recover. This is your pet. This little thing didn't look like his aesthetic. Wait, it looked like a puppy and had a white eggshell hat. Wasn't this the ancient wise beast that Zicheng got? It had already hatched. So fast. He clearly remembered that Zicheng's friends said that Zicheng's ancient wise beast egg took a whole year to hatch. How did it hatch so quickly when it came to Fengwu? Did Fengwu have some special egg hatching technique? Fengwu's hand girl, who was suspected of being an egg hatcher, was speechless. In fact, when Zicheng got this egg, he knew that this little guy wasn't an egg that needed to be hatched at all. It was a severely injured ancient wise beast that had returned to its newborn state. When ancient wise beasts were born, their bodies would be covered with a layer of eggshell-like energy substance. This substance could very well protect the newborn ancient wise beast from any external harm. When they gradually grew up, they would leave this state. They would only return to their newborn state to protect themselves when they encountered fatal danger. In his previous life, after Zicheng obtained the ancient wise beast, he used his points to exchange for a bottle of advanced purifying liquid. With this bottle of advanced purifying liquid, not only did he successfully purify the ancient wise beast's injuries, but he also purified its original intelligence. Therefore, in Baobao's previous life, it could be said that Baobao's intelligence was directly erased by Zicheng. Before Baobao's new intelligence was born, Zicheng successfully made a contract with the ancient wise beast. As for the new spiritual intelligence, it was created by Zicheng using the pills from the system store according to her own requirements. When that spiritual intelligence was born, because of Zicheng, it was completely loyal to her, and didn't even have the thought of rebelling. It was a pity that Zicheng would never tell anyone about this. The favorability system was her biggest secret. Even if those people's favorability with her reached 100, she would never tell anyone about her secret. Even the male lead only thought that Zicheng had received some kind of special treatment. He never knew that the female lead had something like the favorability system. After Baobao was cured by Fengwu, he had been sleeping in the space ring. He slept for 3 days, and only just woke up did he realize that he was in such a smelly place. Baobao expressed that he was very unhappy. How could Baobao be brought to such a place without Baobao's permission? Baobao was unhappy. You're a pet. Your whole family is a pet. Baobao exploded when he heard the word pet. If it wasn't for the eggshell covering his head, his fur would have stood up. Don't make trouble. Fengwu girl touched the eggshell on Baobao's head. The little guy immediately rubbed against Fengwu comfortably. Xiazhua looked at this scene in surprise. He clearly remembered that the ancient wise beast didn't get close to anyone other than Zicheng. Moreover, its personality was stupid and cute. Was it really the same as this arrogant thing? I say, Baobao has only slept for 3 days. How did you come to such a place? The evil aura is so thick that I can't even see the road clearly. How many people have died? Did you enter the demon's tomb? After being intimate with Fengwu for a while, Baobao looked at Fengwu with disappointment. This is a god's tomb. Fengwu corrected. How does this look like a god's tomb? Do you think Baobao hasn't seen a god's tomb before? This really is a god's tomb, and it's the tomb of the god of the sea. Xiazhua interjected. God of the sea? How did you guys get into that guy's tomb? God of the sea is famous for being stingy in the realm of the gods. If you enter other gods' tombs, you might have a chance of getting out alive. But God of the sea will never let those who want to rob his tomb live. No wonder this place has such a thick evil aura. It really is God of the sea's style. Baobao nodded and said with a look of realization. What do you think this is? A dog. A dog? There's such a magical beast? I mean a dog. It's the kind of dog that ordinary people keep at home, to look after their house. Your dog can fly, and it has eggshells on its head. I don't think this is a dog. It should be a dog egg. What's a dog egg? Could it be a cross between a dog and an egg? Damn. Go find an egg and cross it. This is the first time I've heard of a cross between a dog and an egg. The onlookers all pointed at the canine creature that looked like a dog with an eggshell on its head. This little thing can talk. Its level shouldn't be low. I don't think so. After drinking a bottle of spirit awakening elixir, even a pet can talk, let alone a magical beast. That makes sense. Xiazhua, did you guys forget something? A bunch of fish-lipped mortals. Bao Bao proudly glanced at this group of people and snorted disdainfully, indicating that it was an adult with a large number of god-tier wise beasts, and would not stoop to the level of ordinary humans. Stop talking. I say, did you guys forget something? Are we still going in? One of the guys finally couldn't take it anymore. They were here to search for the sea god's treasure, not to gossip about this dog egg. Could they please be clear about their priorities? The group of people who were chatting suddenly understood. Oh, we were just about to go in. I almost forgot. Bro, luckily you're here. Thanks. The others also thanked that brother. But that brother couldn't feel happy. What the fuck was this? If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that there was really a big guy inside, and he couldn't beat it alone, he wouldn't have reminded this group of people. After coming back to their senses, it was time to get down to business. Everyone had already decided to go in and check out the situation. Fengwu pulled Xiazhua with one hand. On her head sat a dog egg that had grabbed her hair and made it look like a bird's nest. Chapter 365. She walked with an elegant gait that no one had ever seen before. She arrived in front of the woman in an instant. The woman only saw a blur before she was sent flying by Fengwu's sword. After taking a blow from Fengwu, the blow landed on her stomach. She felt as if her internal organs were about to be shattered. The pain was unbearable. After spitting out a mouthful of thick blood, the woman's eyes, which were filled with hatred, had a trace of deep fear. Are you all right, Fengwu? Xiazhua looked worriedly at Fengwu, who had just finished a fight. What was wrong with her? She was the one who was in trouble. The onlookers spammed the bullet screen in their hearts. The Fengwu girl shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Bao Bao, who had been sitting on Fengwu's head, sat very steadily from beginning to end. He was not disturbed at all. Bao Bao looked disdainfully at the woman, who was sprawled on the ground like a dead dog. This woman was really ugly. Bao Bao wanted to wash his eyes. Bao Bao's eyes had been polluted by this ugly woman. Wise beasts were different from ordinary beasts. In their eyes, beauty and ugliness did not depend on one's appearance, but on one's heart. No matter how beautiful a person's heart was, in the eyes of the wise beasts, they were still ugly. On the contrary, if a person had a beautiful heart but an ugly appearance, in their eyes, that person was not ugly, but a decent-looking normal person. If a person's heart was as beautiful as their appearance, in the eyes of wise beasts, they had a natural beauty effect and could become a fairy in minutes. In Bao Bao's eyes, Fengwu was a super beauty. Bao Bao had never seen a human as beautiful as Fengwu in his life. It's fine, Fengwu said. Let's go. Xiazhua noticed the strange looks from the people around him. He took Fengwu's hand and took the initiative to walk into the passage that Fengwu had chosen. The people behind watched the two of them go in and hesitated for a moment. They did not know if they should choose this path as well. On the other hand, the brother with dysphoria hesitated for a moment and immediately decided to leave with Fengwu and the others. If he had to choose, he would rather die than suffer from dysphoria. The man entered the passage after Fengwu and Xiazhua. Seeing that 3 people had already walked into this passage, most of the others had already chosen this path. Even if he chose by himself, he might not be able to choose the right path. It was safer to follow the group. Moreover, Fengwu had just said that choosing that path would lead to death. Although he didn't know if what she said was true or not, it was better to believe it than not. Moreover, Fengwu had already chosen a path first. Sure enough, she didn't choose the path that she said would lead to death. Fengwu's words had some effect. After all, the 40 or so people all chose the path chosen by Fengwu and a juror. Almost no one wanted to be unconventional and choose the other path. Even the woman who had been beaten to the ground by Fengwu didn't choose that path. Everyone had a herd mentality. Everyone had chosen the same path. If she chose another path, She would have to take it alone. It was very dangerous to travel alone. Even if this woman wanted to kill Feng Wu, who wanted her to make a fool of herself, she would not choose a path that was the opposite of everyone else just to vent her anger. Feng Wu and Ajur didn't know about this. The two of them carefully walked through the crystal wall passage. The entire passage was silent. Because the passage was made of crystal walls, the entire passage was filled with light. Even the tools used to light the passage could be put away. The passage made of crystal walls twisted and turned. It was impossible to know how long it was, or where it led to. The two of them kept walking forward. They didn't know how far they had walked, but they still didn't see the people behind them. Feng Wu, I'm sorry. I've been a burden to you. Thinking about the scene where the woman suddenly attacked him, he still felt a little uncomfortable. This was the sorrow of being powerless. The strong didn't need a reason to kill the weak. If Feng Wu hadn't stopped the woman, no one would have stood up for him. Why did you come here? Senior Ming, she said that this place was very dangerous. Even Ajur didn't want to come here. Why did Xiazhua come here? Feng Wu looked at Xiazhua in confusion. She couldn't understand why he would take the risk to come to the god tomb. I want to find something. Something that can change fate. Change his fate. And change the fate of Heavenly Wind Continent. What is it? If it was anyone else, they wouldn't have asked. However, Feng Wu girl didn't know much about the ways of the world. She just asked what she wanted to know. She didn't even think about whether it would make things difficult for Xiazhua. If it was someone else who asked, Xiazhua definitely wouldn't answer. However, it was Xiazhua. He couldn't not answer. The heart of water, also known as the water element heart, is a treasure formed from water elements after tens of thousands of years. My body has been weak since I was young. Although I have the talent for water magic, my talent is too low. I can't become a water magician. I don't have the talent for swordsmithing in me at all. When I heard that the water element heart might be hidden in the sea god's tomb, I decided to find it. Only by finding it can my talent for water increase. Only then can I become a water magician. The water element heart? Feng Wu thought for a moment. She seemed to have read a book about the heart of 5 elements. The heart of 5 elements was a rare treasure that only appeared once in 10,000 years. Its value was comparable to a divine weapon. I'll help you find it. Feng Wu heard Xiazhua say that his body was weak and needed the water element heart to heal. From Xiazhua's words, Feng Wu knew that with the water element heart, he could become stronger. Her master said that this was a world that belonged to the strong. If one wasn't strong enough, they could become cannon fodder at any time. But what was cannon fodder? Her master didn't say clearly. Although she didn't know what cannon fodder was, she didn't want Xiazhua to become cannon fodder. Cannon fodder must be very pitiful. This was the answer that Feng Wu girl got from her master's expression when he spoke. Thank you, Feng Wu. Xiazhua was sincerely grateful. This girl obviously didn't know him for long, but she was so good to him. He was really worried that this girl would meet a bad person and not even leave a trace of her. The two of them continued to walk along the passage as they talked. It wasn't until half an hour later that a stone door about 3 meters long and 2 meters wide appeared in front of them. On both sides of the stone door, there were 10 identical murals. The murals were all of the same person, but the scenes were different. This was a human man. From the murals, it could be seen that his status was very high at that time. Chapter 366. Sitting in the little nest made of Feng Wu's hair. Bao Bao was very satisfied with this little nest that he had built himself. Feng Wu's hair was very soft, and Bao Bao felt very comfortable sitting on her head. He did not rule out the possibility that he would stay here for a long time. If Feng Wu girl knew what Bao Bao was thinking, Bao Bao wondered what kind of reaction she would have. Bao Bao stayed on Feng Wu's head obediently, showing great interest in this glowing cave. His pair of big dog eyes were staring at the entrance of the cave. Feng Wu calmly pulled Xiazhua to follow behind the group, and step by step, they carefully entered the cave. Originally, everyone was on guard, thinking that some big guy would emerge from the cave and engage in a life-and-death battle with them. Unexpectedly, after entering the cave, there was nothing but a large piece of glowing white crystal. Inside the cave, A large piece of strangely shaped crystal stood there, and the whole cave was emitting a white light, looking very beautiful. Everyone looked around the cave, and after confirming that there were no dangerous creatures, they were slightly relieved. In the innermost part of the cave, there were 2 crystal walls made of crystal. At a glance, they could not see the inside of the 2 crystal walls. The 9 turns and 18 coves in the cave could not be seen clearly at a glance. When they arrived at the 2 passages, everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to choose for a moment. There was a possibility of life and death in the 2 paths, and there was also a possibility that both paths could lead them out. But the danger was different. If it was the second path, it would be fine. But if it was the first path, if they chose the wrong one, they would really have to stay in the tomb of the sea god for the rest of their lives. While the others were in a dilemma, Fengwu stared at the 2 passages in a daze. In her eyes, the 2 paths were bloody and full of evil spirit. The evil spirit in the cave was several times stronger than outside. Fengwu did not learn much about the undead, and she did not know much about them. Most of what she knew was from Liddy. Originally, it was best to bring Liddy to a place full of evil spirit. Fengwu tried to summon Liddy, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't summon Liddy's spirit body. Both paths were filled with bloody light, but one of the paths was filled with a dense aura of death. Clearly, this path was a dead end, and anyone who entered would die. This way, Fengwu pointed at the path without any death aura, and looked at everyone seriously. Little girl, why do we have to take the path you mentioned? Give us a reason first. A male swordsman rubbed his nose. He was a man who had difficulty making a choice, so he asked in confusion. Yeah, why should we listen to you? A female magician sneered. This female magician was one of the 3 women who survived. Other than Fengwu, who was a swordswoman, the other 2 were magicians. Although they were both women, they were very smart. When faced with the choice of taking the water or flying to the island, both of them chose to fly over. Moreover, they really succeeded, becoming one of the only 3 women who survived. Fengwu was the only swordswoman among the 3 women. There were already very few female swordswomen who entered the tomb of the sea god this time. There were a few who died halfway through the first stage, and only Fengwu survived. Although only 3 women survived, they weren't very close to each other. This was the first time she heard the voices of the other 2 female magicians. You'll die if you take this path. Fengwu looked at the woman who spoke, and felt a dense malice from her. The Fengwu girl tilted her head. This person is so strange. Why is she looking at me like that? Of course, the woman wouldn't answer the question in the Fengwu girl's heart. She just looked at Fengwu and sneered. The other female magician stood not far away, and looked at the confrontation between them, but didn't say anything. There are so many of us, but we can't tell which path is the safest. How can a teenage girl like you know? The woman's voice was full of disdain and ridicule. Whether you believe it or not is your problem. Fengwu said what she knows for the sake of everyone. If you think she's wrong, you can go in this way. No one will stop you. Xiazhua, who had always been gentle and courteous, spoke fearlessly with a cold look in his eyes. You, the woman was furious. You overconfident piece of trash. A piece of trash like you dares to speak nonsense in front of me? You're courting death. The magic balls in the woman's hands quickly condensed as she chanted an incantation. 2 flashing white balls attacked Shozo mercilessly. The onlookers who were watching from the side didn't expect this woman to kill people so easily. They also didn't expect this woman to be an ice magician. Ice magicians were mutated from water magicians, but they were more powerful than water magicians. There weren't many ice magicians on the continent. Compared to the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, the number of ice magicians was much lower. Although there weren't many ice magicians, every ice magician was a rare genius. They were definitely valued by the major families. Shozo also didn't expect this woman to be so unreasonable. She directly attacked him when she couldn't win the argument. He was just an ordinary person, and it was impossible for him to dodge. He was now very glad that his family was worried that he would be in danger, so they put a lot of defensive magic items on him. Even his clothes were set up with several layers of defensive magic arrays. With these equipment, As long as he didn't meet a powerful expert, it wouldn't be easy to kill him. Just as Xiazhua was about to receive this blow, Feng Wu unsheathed her short sword. With a flash of sword light, the two white light balls full of ice power were split in half. A few pieces of ice and large pieces of ice scattered on the ground. When the woman saw that Feng Wu blocked her attack so easily, her face turned red, and a trace of hatred flashed in her eyes. She raised the magic staff in her hand, and chanted an incantation faster and faster. A piece of ice blade condensed in the air, and attacked Feng Wu and Shouzo together. The ice blade cut through the air, and attacked the two people with murderous intent. Feng Wu pulled Shouzo to the side, and dodged the first wave of attack. Then the sword in her hand danced, and the small sword emitted a light green qi. Feng Wu condensed the qi on the sword, and used the spring breeze swordsmanship that she learned from Bai Lianfeng. Her movements were beautiful, and the attack power was amazing. On the tip of Feng Wu's small sword, a green light flashed again and again. With the spring breeze swordsmanship, the large piece of ice blade was blocked by the green qi of the sword, and couldn't get close. Feng Wu circulated the fighting power in her body. All the ice blades near the small sword were immediately shattered into pieces. Seeing this, the woman wanted to use a more powerful killing move, but Feng Wu didn't give her the chance. Chapter 367. The man was wearing clothes from ancient times. From the painting, one could see that the clothes were very beautiful. The man sat alone on 5 thrones. A group of men and women knelt in front of the man and kowtowed. Those people's eyes were full of worship and humility. Then the painting started to change. There was a man riding a horse and commanding an army. There was also a man marrying a beautiful woman. Then there were countless scary giant meteorites falling from the sky. The people in the painting were desperate and scared. Through the painting, one could almost hear their desperate cries for help. Ah, this is, that damn sea god is a selfish madman. No wonder the other gods don't want to be with him. This guy is crazy. Baby, who had been dozing off on Feng Wu's head, saw the painting and started screaming. Baby! Feng Wu touched its eggshell and smoothed out its fur. Is there something wrong with this place? Xiazhua knew how powerful the ancient wise beasts were. They weren't very powerful, but they were smarter than humans. If they weren't smart, they wouldn't have become wise beasts. After being smoothed out, the little thing shut up. But its voice was still very excited. Of course there is a problem. Sea God is a madman. He made a tomb like this. No wonder there is such a strong murderous aura. It would be strange if the murderous aura wasn't strong. Bao Bao was yelling and swearing, and his mouth was saying something that no one could understand. Fortunately, before Xiazhua could ask, Baby told him everything. I didn't think this place was a god's tomb. Sea God did something to it. Baby said angrily. Did something? What did Sea God do to his own tomb? Speaking of which, this was the Sea God's tomb in the first place. Shouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted? He couldn't figure out what Baby was angry about. The Sea God mixed the tombs of the kings of the human world with his own tomb, and made the dead kings become the gatekeepers of his tomb. The souls of the kings, and the souls of those who were buried with them will be sealed in this place forever. Their souls will never be able to rest in peace. They will stay in the Sea God's tomb and suffer. The more pain they are in, the stronger their baleful aura will be, and the more dangerous it will be for those who enter the divine tomb. If I'm not wrong, the Sea God probably brought more than one tomb of the emperors. There are many more. After 10,000 years, the tombs of the human emperors have become extremely dangerous places. Once you enter, you'll definitely die. The Sea God's tomb is hidden among the emperor's tombs. It's impossible to find the Sea God's tomb in the emperor's tombs. Even if you do find it, you might die there. The Sea God is famous for his selfishness and ruthlessness in the god realm. He would never allow his burial goods to fall into the hands of a human. Baby said something bad about Sea God. Clearly, he didn't think much of Sea God. Now, Shouzo was starting to believe Irene's words about Ziqing being the son of fortune and the daughter of destiny. He had heard Ziqing's friends and followers say that although Ziqing had encountered some danger when he entered the Sea God's tomb, He had passed through it safely. When Zicheng entered, he didn't encounter any of the emperor's tombs. In other words, Zicheng entered the sea god's main tomb directly. Then, he saved himself from the various means left behind by the sea god, and took away the precious treasures in the sea god's tomb. One of them was the water elemental heart. This time, the divine tomb opened with a lot of random people. The difficulty of entering the tomb increased a lot. Even the emperor's tombs that had never been heard of before were used. Why would the sea god do this? What's the point of him getting a bunch of emperor's tombs to guard his tomb? He's already the sea god. Why would he care about a tomb keeper like a human emperor? This was the question that Shozo couldn't figure out the most. They were already gods, but the tomb keeper let the human emperors be the tomb keeper. He even sealed their souls. No matter how he thought about it, it was completely unnecessary. Ha ha ha, do you think gods are omnipotent? Let me tell you, no matter how powerful a god is, once he dies, his power will gradually dissipate. The reason why the sea god got these emperors' tombs and used all these means is that he hoped that when his power weakened, these emperors' tombs that were always shrouded in baleful qi could stop outsiders. There are many imprisoned souls in these emperors' tombs. No one knows where their souls are imprisoned by the sea god. As long as those souls are not destroyed, these emperors' tombs will always be a terrible place. The sea god is a god, but he did such a terrible thing. What's the difference between him and a demon? Imprisoning a person's soul for eternity, just to keep them here to produce baleful qi. This was something that only an inhumane person would do. It was hard to imagine that the one who did all this was a god, and an innate god. This had completely overturned Shozo's outlook on life. So what if he's a god? Who told you that gods must have a kind heart? You've read too many myths. There are good and bad people, and gods are the same. If all gods are good, then what's the matter with the Lord of the Demon Realm? Before the Lord of the Demon Realm fell into the Demon Realm, he was an innate god of the Celestial Realm. And among the innate gods, he was one of the strongest. Even such an existence fell into the Demon Realm. Bao Bao rolled his eyes and looked at him with disdain. So he was being looked down upon by a demonic beast? Although this was a god-level intelligent beast, it still made him feel uncomfortable. He suddenly wanted to beat the dog up. Then there's an emperor's tomb behind this door. Shozo didn't want to be looked down upon by a dog with an eggshell on its head. So he decisively changed the topic. At least you're not completely stupid, Bao Bao said proudly. Haha. How do we enter this place? Fengwu pushed the door. The door was only 3 meters tall, but it wouldn't budge no matter how hard she tried. There should be a mechanism. Once you find the mechanism, you should be able to enter. But are you sure you want to enter the tomb with 2 people? It's very dangerous inside. The emperor's body has probably turned into a zombie. The so-called corpse fiend was to place a corpse in an extremely ominous place filled with baleful qi. Over the years, the corpse would be eroded by the baleful qi. In the end, the baleful qi would form a new consciousness in the corpse that was filled with killing intent. This consciousness was born in the baleful qi, and was born to kill. Chapter 368. The so-called zombie was a corpse that was placed in a place filled with murderous aura. Over the years, the corpse would be eroded by the murderous aura. In the end, the murderous aura would form a new consciousness in the corpse that was filled with murderous aura. This consciousness was born from the murderous aura, and was born to kill. Other than killing, the corpse that had turned into a zombie did not have any consciousness. It was not an exaggeration to call it a killing machine. Damn, this passage is too long. It took us so long to walk out. A voice was approaching while cursing. Fengwu and Shozo turned around, and saw a man walking towards them with a sword in his hand. This man was the one who walked in after Fengwu and Shozo. There were other voices coming from behind the man. It seemed that the people behind them were about to arrive. Shozo heaved a sigh of relief. It was good to have more people. The more people there were, the better. After hearing from Bao Bao about the dangers of this place, he and Fengwu might really die inside. I finally see the 2 of you. I didn't see the 2 of you along the way. I thought something had happened to the 2 of you. The man laughed when he saw Fengwu and Shozo. Thank you for your concern. We are fine. Shozo smiled back. What is this place? Is this the main burial chamber of the sea god's tomb? The man looked at the 3-meter-tall stone door excitedly. If it were not for the door blocking him, he would have rushed in immediately. What? We have reached the main burial chamber. We arrived so quickly. I thought we would have to go through a few levels to reach the main burial chamber. Is this really the main burial chamber of the sea god? I don't think so. Damn you. Isn't this the sea god's tomb? What's so strange about us finding the main burial chamber? The group of people at the back looked at the 3-meter-tall door and chattered nonstop. Only the woman who was taught a lesson by Fengwu not long ago was glaring at Fengwu with hatred. If looks could kill, Fengwu would have been killed countless times. Shozo felt a malicious intent coming from a certain direction. He turned around and saw the person emitting the malicious intent. Isn't this the woman who was taught a lesson by Fengwu? Xiazhua could tell that this woman hated the two of them, especially Fengwu. As long as this woman had the chance, she would not hesitate to kill them. Xiazhua moved his body closer to Fengwu, shielding Fengwu from that intense gaze. The woman snorted coldly and turned her head to the side. Strange, why can't I open the door? A group of people surrounded the gate, trying to open the door with brute force. They also tried to open the door with magic, but to no avail. The inconspicuous stone door was still standing there motionless. 40 or so people stood at the entrance. They didn't know what to do once they entered. If the door couldn't be opened, they couldn't enter. It was simply wishful thinking to think that they could obtain the divine tools and sacred tools inside. Everyone, take a look at these murals. Do you think there's anything wrong with them? A magician raised his magic staff and called out. Hearing this, everyone gathered around. Only these murals looked strange in this place. Could it be that the way to open the door was in these murals? Everyone gathered together and touched the 10 murals from head to toe, trying to find a way to open the door. At this time, Fengwu and Ajur were also looking around for a way to enter the tomb. Although this was only an emperor's tomb, and not the tomb of the sea god, they still had to go. Even if they knew, they had no choice but to move forward. After all, this was the only way to leave this place. If they wanted to go to the real sea god's tomb, they would have to go through one emperor's tomb after another, until they found the real one. Fengwu, come over here and look at this wall. After knocking on the wall for a long time, Shozo found a hollow wall, and immediately called Fengwu over. The passageway was only so big, so everyone could hear him. Xiazua's shouts were naturally heard by others as well. Those who heard him immediately gave up on studying the murals and ran behind Xiazhua. There were even a few bad-tempered ones who directly kicked Xiazhua away, almost causing him to fall to the ground. Fengwu caught Xiazhua in the blink of an eye and stopped him from falling to the ground. Fengwu's eyes flashed with anger. Bad guy, bullying Shozo. Fengwu girl was angry. She lifted her leg and wanted to teach the person who almost caused Shozo to fall to the ground a lesson. Shozo hurriedly pulled Fengwu back. Don't go, I'm fine. He looked at Fengwu and shook his head. Fengwu bit her lips and nodded in the end. She didn't want to cause trouble for that person. This stone wall is hollow. Let's take a look. Maybe the mechanism is in this stone wall. The person standing at the front spat on his hands. Rubbing his hands together, he grabbed his large sword and slashed at the stone wall. After a few slashes, a small hole appeared on the stone wall. Inside the hole was a disc-shaped object. This object was installed in the wall. They didn't know if it was the mechanism they were looking for. Someone tried to turn the disc-shaped object. Sure enough, it worked. There was a rumbling sound, followed by the sound of chains turning. In the quiet passageway, it was ear-piercing. The door slowly opened amidst the rumbling sound. At the same time, the other adventurers in the Supreme Emperor's tomb also encountered various problems. Ziqing and Kai San had already entered the Supreme Emperor's tomb before Fengwu. They encountered a large group of zombies in the tomb, and were now fighting with a group of zombies. Mingxi brought the divine beast's 7-colored phoenix, and used its phoenix fire to burn many zombies. His unstoppable strength made the people who entered the tomb with him revere him. They simply treated him as a killing god. Irene and Elisa's side was also quite smooth. Ever since Irene received God's inheritance in the two-realm battlefield, her strength had increased greatly. Ordinary people really couldn't beat her. In addition, she was familiar with the plot and obtained many opportunities that belonged to others in advance. Protecting her own safety was definitely not a problem. As a little princess, Elisa had many good things on her. In addition, she was also a powerful magic caster. She also met Irene, so everything went very smoothly. Although many people who entered the tomb with them died, Irene and Elisa were fine except for some injuries. Margaret and Matson, the siblings, were unlucky not to be in the same tomb. After kicking a bored man who tried to flirt with her to the wall, Margaret clapped her hands and sized up the tomb that she had just entered. Chapter 369. The siblings Margaret and Matson were unlucky enough not to be buried in the same tomb. After kicking a bored man who tried to flirt with her to the wall, Margaret clapped her hands and looked around the tomb that she had just entered. If this was the main tomb of the sea god, she would rather write her name backwards. When they saw the scene of a cute girl beating up a big guy, they both made the decision to stay away from this girl. Speaking of which, where were the others? Where were they? Do you dare to answer if I call you? The door slowly opened. Because it had not been opened for a long time, a large cloud of dust came out as soon as it opened. Fengwu waved her hand and created a combat energy shield for herself and Shozo to protect them from the dust. The door is open. Haha, all the good things in here belong to LZ. No one can fight with LZ. Divine weapon. There must be a divine weapon in here. As the tomb opened, there seemed to be the light of a treasure shining inside. Under the light of the treasure, the greed in the hearts of the humans was completely drawn out. The heart of water. It must be inside. I'm going to find the heart of water. The heart of water is mine. No one can snatch it from me. Xiaozuo's eyes were filled with madness. He pushed Fengwu away and was about to charge forward. Fengwu frowned when she saw this. She channeled a trace of pure sword energy and shot it into Shozo's forehead. Shozo's expression was a little dazed. What just happened? Are you okay? Fengwu patted his face and asked with concern. What happened? Shozo noticed that the crowd around him had gone crazy. His eyes flashed with shock. What was going on? How could these people suddenly lose their minds and rush forward? You were controlled by the greed in your heart. As expected of a fish-lipped human. Other than Fengwu, this silly girl, who doesn't have any greed in her heart. Everyone here has greed. No wonder you were affected. Bao Bao laid on Fengwu's head and bit on Fengwu's hair as he looked at the crazy crowd with disdain. Greed. There's something wrong with that light. The moment the door opened, everyone felt a ray of light shining on them. He remembered that when he saw the ray of light, his consciousness began to fade. Of course, that light can magnify the greed in people's hearts. In other words, if you only have 10 points in your heart, it can magnify it to 100. Although you have greed in your heart, you don't have any ill intentions. Although this light will affect you, it won't be a big problem. As for those people, do you see it? In addition to magnifying the greed in their hearts, even their evil thoughts have been magnified. Even killing and seizing treasures have begun in advance. Bao Bao said as if he was watching a good show. In front of the door, a group of people were fighting, not willing to let anyone enter first. Everyone felt that the treasures inside belonged to them alone. Anyone who wanted to enter the tomb was robbing them and had to be killed. In front of the door, a fierce battle had begun. People were constantly injured and bleeding, but no one cried out in pain or retreated. Their eyes were red with killing intent, and their hearts were controlled by greed and evil thoughts. Xiaochun. A silver ancient sword appeared in Fengwu's hand. This sword was the pure sword. The pure sword had already felt the billowing killing intent in this place. The entire sword was drooling at the killing intent. If it wasn't for Fengwu holding it down, it would have rushed out to eat. Go wake them up, Fengwu said to Xiaochun. Xiaozuo looked curiously at the spiritual sword in front of him. This couldn't be a sacred weapon, right? It was so spiritual. It wasn't that Xiaozuo's family didn't have any sacred weapons. He was no stranger to sacred weapons. But this was the first time he had seen one with such spirituality. Obviously, this sword couldn't have any expression, but he could still feel the sword's disappointment under Fengwu's order. It seemed like it wanted to eat a big meal, but Fengwu only gave it porridge and side dishes. Did a sword need to eat? He must be hallucinating, because he wasn't fully awake yet. Although Xiaoqun wanted to eat a big meal, he didn't dare to disobey Fengwu's order. He could only obediently release his energy to wake these people up from their greed and evil thoughts. Xiaoqun was indeed the purest and most flawless divine artifact in the world. Just a sliver of its power was enough to awaken these fellows who had fallen into madness. What's wrong with me? Who attacked me? Who hurt LZ? Come out. I promise I won't beat you to death. Io. Ouch, it hurts. Which damn bastard dared to stab me in the ass? Don't let LZ know who it is, or LZ will kill you. 8 out of 10 people who woke up were injured. They couldn't remember how they were injured. Although they were cursing, their hearts were filled with shock. They knew that they had been tricked. Fortunately, they woke up in time. If they were late, they might have lost half their lives here. There must be something wrong with that light. These people weren't stupid. They quickly found the root of the problem. I think so too. I don't know what that light is. I only saw it once and I felt dizzy. Then I couldn't remember anything. Me too. That light was fucking evil. Huh. I say, why are the two of you completely fine? In a group of people who were bleeding and injured, it was difficult not to attract attention when 2 people were standing in perfect condition. Even their clothes were not wrinkled. Therefore, Fengwu and Shouzo quickly attracted the attention of others. It couldn't be helped. Although their clothes were not spotless, compared to the others, they were unbelievably clean. There wasn't even a trace of blood on them. Wasn't it obvious that there was something wrong with the 2 of them? Did you do it? So many of us have lost consciousness. Why are you all fine? Did you want to take the treasure for yourself? So you deliberately hurt us. The person who shouted was none other than the female magician, who was taught a lesson by Fengwu. This woman wanted to kill Fengwu for a long time. Of course, she would use such a good opportunity to deal with the woman, who made her lose face in front of so many people. Hey, you really dare. Xiazhua wanted to laugh at her. This woman was simply too annoying. Xiazhua rarely allowed himself to hate someone, because he didn't want to live his life in hatred. However, he didn't have a good impression of this woman. If Fengwu wanted to kill her, he would raise both hands and feet to support it. I didn't do it, Fengwu said seriously. Chapter 370. Why did this person accuse her and Xiazhua of doing it? She and Xiazhua clearly didn't do anything. The Fengwu girl bit her lips, feeling wronged. She had asked Xiaoqun to save someone, but she was wrongly accused by the person she saved. The Fengwu girl felt uncomfortable and wanted to hit someone. Don't think that everything will be fine if you deny it. If you say that you didn't do it, then why did all of us get hit, but you two are fine? Does that make sense? The woman smiled viciously. If it wasn't for Fengwu saving you, you would have already killed each other. Jumping out to accuse your savior as soon as you were saved, you really are shameless. Xiagu was very angry, feeling indignant for Fengwu. If he had known earlier, he would have saved this woman and let her go crazy. That way, he wouldn't have been bitten by her. When everyone heard Xiaozua's words, they were shocked. It was hard to imagine that the person who saved them was this black-haired girl. It was too hard to believe that this little loli could save them. Thinking of this, everyone's eyes couldn't help but show a trace of suspicion. Seeing that no one believed him, Xiazhua was slightly angry. These people were really ingrates. He might as well not have saved them. Do you know what that light was? Xiazhua smiled coldly. What is it? Someone couldn't help but ask. That light can magnify the negative energy in a person's heart. For example, greed and evil thoughts. When we were hit by that light, our greed and evil thoughts were magnified at the same time. That's why everyone lost their minds and attacked the people around them. Because everyone wanted to monopolize the treasure, they killed everyone they saw. I was also controlled by greed. Fortunately, Fengwu was beside me and saved me in time. Otherwise, I would have been like everyone else and killed each other. With my strength, if I had rushed in front of everyone, I would have died. You said that she saved you? What did she use to save you? the woman said arrogantly, her cold face full of suspicion. Why should I tell you? Xiaozhua looked up with disdain. You. The woman was infuriated. A normal person dared to give her such a look? If she didn't kill this guy, she wouldn't be human. Everyone, let's hurry up and recover. Now that the tomb door has been opened, we should continue moving forward and not listen to others arguing over a guess. A swordsman with a long sword said. They were here to hunt for treasures. Who had the time to listen to other people's quarrels? The others thought the same and nodded their heads. Then, they each took out the medicine they carried with them to treat their injuries. Are you going to let these two despicable bastards go just like that? The woman screamed in disbelief. The others continued to heal themselves and ignored her. However, the man who had spoken first, Wuxia, turned around and glanced at her. Please settle your personal grudges. Don't treat others as fools. The woman's face immediately turned red and white. The others who were watching this scene sneered in their hearts. This woman really thought that they didn't know what she was thinking. Wasn't it just that she couldn't deal with the black-haired loli and wanted everyone to stand on her side and help her? It was a good idea, but it depended on whether they were willing to cooperate or not. There were very few idiots who could reach this stage except for that woman, who would be willing to make enemies for a stranger they had never met before. Xiaozhua was happy to see that the woman was defeated. He found a place to sit down with Fengwu and started eating. He felt that the meat bun in his hand had become even more delicious. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, the woman lowered her head, and her eyes were filled with hatred. Just you wait. You people who look down on me can be smug. Don't let her find a chance. Otherwise, I'll make sure you all die a horrible death. Anyone who dares to look down on the Lianya family can go to hell. This woman was from a side branch of the Lianya family. The sixth elder of the Lianya family, Shiat, who had died at the hands of Skycliff, was her father. Her name was Bess. She had always relied on her relationship with Shiat to do whatever she wanted in the Lianya family. Other than the direct descendants of the family and the children of the other elders, she didn't need to give face to anyone. But some time ago her good days came to an end. Shiat was killed. Without his protection, those who had been bullied by her in the past had been looking for opportunities to take revenge. There was once when she was surrounded by the daughter of the ninth elder, who used to be inferior to her. She almost died in their hands. Fortunately, she still had some tricks up her sleeve. Her father doted on her a lot and left her a lot of good things so that she wouldn't be killed so easily. She killed the ninth elder's daughter and her followers instead, becoming a traitor of the Lianya family. But Bess didn't regret it. What was the point of staying in a family that couldn't protect her? If the Lianya family really cared about her father's achievements, they wouldn't have let the ninth elder's daughter cause trouble for her, causing her status in the family to plummet. In fact, the Lianya family wasn't that heartless. Even if the sixth elder was dead, Bess was still a rare ice magus. She was also considered a genius in the family, so the Lianya family wouldn't give up on such a talent. The monthly allowance and potions that she was supposed to receive were not reduced. It was just that the potions and money that Shiat used to give her were no longer available. But Bess blamed the family for the money that Shiat gave her. She thought that since her father had sacrificed himself for the Lianya family, she should be treated the same as her father before he died. Since her father couldn't give her any more money, the Lianya family should take the initiative to do so. If they didn't do so, they would be heartless. And what she thought of being bullied for revenge was even more nonsense. Other than the ninth elder's daughter, who wanted to take the opportunity to punish Bess because she had been bullied by her in the past, the other people's attitude towards her was at most not as fearful as before. Those who tried to curry favor with her also left. There was no other bullying. The main reason was that she couldn't accept such a difference in treatment. She had never suffered a little. Others just changed their attitude towards her, although they would occasionally say a few words to her. But when it came to offending her, no one would do so. Everyone knew that Bess had high potential and was also an ice magus. In the future, she might even have a seat in the Elders' Council. As long as they weren't stupid, they wouldn't offend her. It was only because she was too fragile that she couldn't bear the slightest grievance. Later, she killed the ninth elder's daughter, became a traitor, and fled from the Lianya family. After Bess fled from the Lianya family, she had been traveling alone in the Great Evils, looking for the murderer of her father. Unfortunately, she couldn't find Skycliff no matter how many times she searched. Instead, she found Fengwu and Mingxi. For these people who were with Skycliff, the Lianya family had already investigated them thoroughly. They even drew portraits of them, so Bess could easily recognize Fengwu and the others. Chapter 371. Although the Lianya family had investigated that those people were the students of Notre Dame du Starlight, there were a few people who couldn't find out their identity. Every time they checked, there was a secret force to prevent them from investigating, which made the Lianya family not dare to make a move easily. The identity of Mingxi and Skycliff was very mysterious. They spent a lot of money, but couldn't find anything. However, other people, including Fengwu, were investigated. Fengwu's identity as the Feng family's first daughter was also dug out. It could be said that except for Mingxi and Skycliff, the identity of other people was almost investigated. Although Fengwu was the Feng family's first daughter, according to their investigation, the Feng family had already abandoned her. An unmarried and pregnant first daughter. Who would dare to take in such a person who was abandoned by the family? Even if her previous identity was prominent, the Lianya family wouldn't put her in their eyes. When Biska saw Fengwu, she had already made up her mind to kill her. Even Mingxi was on her kill list. But through the investigation of the Lianya family, Biska felt that Mingxi's identity was very complicated. She didn't know if killing him would cause unnecessary trouble. Mingxi couldn't make a move for a while, so Fengwu became an important person to attract Biska's firepower. Along the way, whenever she had the opportunity, she would find trouble with Fengwu. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't want to kill in front of these people, she would have already killed Fengwu to avenge her father. After an hour of rest and recovery, everyone's injuries had been treated. Now what they had to do was to enter the tomb. Behind the stone door, it was dark. It was very different from the outside. Outside the stone door, there was a shining crystal wall that brought light to everyone. But behind the stone door, there seemed to be nothing. There was nothing to light up, and nothing could be seen. Taking out the magic props for illumination, everyone walked into the stone door with vigilance. Just as the first person walking in front stepped into the stone door, suddenly, there was a bright light. Behind the stone door was a spacious hall. There were 4 pillars in the hall, and in the center of the hall were 2 stone coffins. The sarcophagus looked ancient and grand, but the craftsmanship was crude. It could be seen that the person inside the sarcophagus didn't have a high status. On top of each of the 4 pillars, there was a 7-star lamp. Now the 7-star lamp was permanently lit. Although the light was not as dazzling as the crystal outside, the basic illumination was not a problem. Around the hall, there were several huge murals. The murals were similar to the ones outside, but on the murals, there was a huge stone statue. The person on the stone statue was a man with rough facial features. The man held a scepter in his hand. He looked noble and extraordinary, and his eyes were filled with contempt for all living beings. Look, aren't the people on these murals the sea god? Someone pointed at the murals with stone carvings, and said with uncertainty, "It's possible. The sea god was a god worshipped by all the countries on the sea at that time. The statue on this painting is most likely the sea god," someone replied. At this time, a man with a double axe walked between the 2 sarcophagus, and began to open the lid of one of the sarcophagus. "What are you doing?" Seeing the man's actions, everyone asked in surprise. "Do you even need to say it?" "Of course. I'm opening the sarcophagus to see if there are any treasures inside. This is the tomb of the sea god. Even if it's just a small character buried with him, there must be a lot of good things in the sarcophagus. Don't tell me you don't want it." The man looked at the people who were glaring at him with disdain. "If I were you, I wouldn't touch the things in the tomb." Shouzo suddenly spoke at this time. Everyone turned to look at Shouzo and Fengwu, who were standing not far from the door. Shouzo was probably the weakest of all, so he had been ignored by everyone. He usually didn't take the initiative to speak, except for Bess, who had been looking for opportunities to deal with him and Fengwu. No one would pay extra attention to an ordinary person like him. Now that he suddenly spoke, everyone was a little surprised. "Pretty boy, you don't have the right to speak here." The man with the axe seemed to be disdainful of Shouzo. He couldn't stand other people's hypocrisy. They were obviously here for the treasure. What was wrong with opening the sarcophagus? When the treasure was discovered, these people would be more excited than him. As for Shouzo, the man didn't care at all. Shouzo was just a pretty boy who relied on women to survive. Who would care about this kind of man? Such obvious disdain, he believed that anyone could see it. However, Shouzo didn't say anything because of the man's disdain and contempt. This place has long been set up as a place to cultivate corpses. The corpse in the sarcophagus has already become a zombie. Once the sarcophagus is opened, the consequences will be unimaginable. Shouzo said with a serious face. Unfortunately, not many people believed his words. Cultivating corpses with evil. If there really was an evil aura, why couldn't the others find it? Why did a piece of trash like you find it? Are you kidding me? If they really couldn't even compare to an ordinary person, they could just go and die. Because he was confident in his own strength, no one believed his words. Instead, they thought Shouzo was just trying to please the crowd. Bess didn't hide her ridicule. He really overestimated himself. A mere ordinary person wanted to show off in front of a group of strong people. How ridiculous. Fengwu silently looked at the group. She could see that these people didn't believe Shouzo's words. Shouzo obviously didn't lie, so why didn't they want to believe him? Don't joke around. Cultivating corpses with evil aura. Who do you think you are? How can you tell if this is a place to cultivate corpses with evil aura? The man sneered and continued what he was doing. He had long been excited by the treasure in his imagination. How could he have the time to care about a piece of trash? Shouzo sighed and didn't try to convince them. He knew that it was useless to say anything now. He didn't have much hope in the first place, so he wasn't too disappointed. The sarcophagus will be opened soon. What should we do now? Shouzo looked at Fengwu. As the only fighting force in their temporary team, Fengwu was the one who made the decision. Fengwu blinked her big eyes, as if asking Shouzo why he was asking her. No matter who she teamed up with, Fengwu was never the one who came up with ideas. She was used to just following orders. Suddenly, someone came to ask her for her opinion. This girl felt a little strange. Run to the back of the hall later. Bao Bao, who was sitting on Fengwu's hair, interrupted before Fengwu could speak. Shouzo glanced at Bao Bao and nodded, indicating that he understood. Chapter 372. Fengwu watched the man open the coffin. If he didn't listen to Xiazhua, something bad would definitely happen. The Fengwu girl bit her lip. She could already see the baleful aura coming out of the coffin. Everyone was paying attention to the man's movements. The weapons in their hands were already tightly gripped in their hands. If the man really opened up a treasure, a great battle would begin. Even Bess aimed her staff at the man. As soon as the treasure appeared, she would immediately attack the man. Finally, the lid of the coffin was pushed open by the man. As soon as the lid was opened, the others immediately went forward to see what was inside. When they went forward to take a look, they saw a beautiful girl in a beautiful dress. The girl looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. She was beautiful and lively, and her skin was as white as jade. Her lips had a touch of bright red, looking very attractive. The white dress she was wearing was very gorgeous. It seemed to be some kind of sacrificial dress. The girl wore a silver bracelet on her body, and a string of copper bells on her waist. Other than these, there were no other extra accessories. Although the girl had been dead for many years, her body didn't seem to have changed at all. Time seemed to have stopped at her most beautiful moment. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't feel her breathing, everyone would have thought that the girl was just sleeping. Who would have thought that this was a female corpse that had been dead for many years? How? How is this possible? The sea god's tomb came from the primordial era. Tens of thousands of years have passed since the primordial era. How can the corpse not rot after tens of thousands of years? Someone exclaimed when they saw the young girl's skin. That's right. It's impossible for the corpse to remain the same for tens of thousands of years. Although this coffin looks good, it's not a treasure. It can't preserve the corpse for so long without decomposing. Could it be that this girl really has some kind of treasure that can preserve her body for tens of thousands of years? As this speculation was voiced out, the eyes of the man who opened the coffin lit up. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. Wasn't it true? If there wasn't a treasure, how could the corpse not decompose for tens of thousands of years? The man immediately stretched out his hand and touched the female corpse's body. A rough hand constantly groped the female corpse's body. What are you doing? You won't even let the female corpse go. Are you that thirsty? One of the men behind the man looked at the man as if he was a pervert. Can't you see? He's looking for a treasure that can prevent the corpse from rotting. Another person next to the man said with a smile. The two people who spoke were still very young. They didn't seem to be over 30 years old. Judging from their clothes, their family background should be quite good. Therefore, they weren't interested in the treasure that could prevent the corpse from decomposing. Don't let him take all the benefits. There's still another sarcophagus. Let's open it first. Someone was envious of the man who had opened the sarcophagus. He immediately thought of another sarcophagus that could be opened for treasure hunting. After being reminded, everyone remembered that there was indeed a stone coffin where they could find treasures. Because the man didn't encounter any danger after opening the sarcophagus, these people became bolder and put all their thoughts on treasure hunting. Under everyone's efforts, the other sarcophagus was opened. This time, a well-dressed youth appeared in the sarcophagus. The youth was very delicate and handsome. His skin was as smooth and delicate as the girl's. Not even a single pore could be seen. Looking at it now, he was a proper little fresh meat. The youth's clothes were exactly the same as the girl's. There was also a string of copper bells on the youth's body. Other than that, there were no other ornaments. Everyone was delighted. Great, this corpse didn't change. This meant that there was also a treasure on this corpse. What were they waiting for? Let's find it. The group of men began to touch the youth's corpse, trying to find the treasure they imagined. This group of people acted as if they hadn't seen a woman for more than 10 years. They stretched out their perverted hands towards the youth's corpse. At this time, a scream suddenly sounded. The people who were stripping off the youth's clothes turned around and saw that the people who were originally surrounding the man had all scattered. As for the man who was insignificant just now, his heart had been grabbed out by a jade-white hand. The one who did it was actually the female corpse that had been dead for 10,000 years. The female corpse that was originally sleeping in the sarcophagus had opened her eyes. Her eyes were actually crimson red. As long as one looked into her eyes, they seemed to be able to see a boundless sea of corpses and the painful wails of the dead souls. The man's heart was in her hand. There was a large hole in his chest. When the girl pulled out the heart, she could see the scene in front of the man through the hole. The corpse has changed. It was unknown who cried out. From the woman killing the man, to them retreating reflexively, to someone screaming in fear. All of this happened in an instant. But for those who had experienced it, it felt like a long time had passed. Be careful, don't touch that string of copper bells. Someone suddenly thought of something and shouted. But it was still too late. Among the group of people who were groping the youth's corpse, one of them had already grabbed the copper bells. Although he couldn't feel any magic fluctuations from the bells, and could tell that it wasn't a magic tool, the fact that the bells appeared on the two corpses meant that they had a history. He could take it down and study it. Just as that person was about to take the bells, the man who was killed happened to be frightened. When the other man shouted that he couldn't touch the bells were accidentally pulled out by that person. The moment the bells were pulled out, the youth suddenly opened his eyes. As for the man who pulled out the bells, he didn't even have time to scream before he followed in the footsteps of the man whose heart was pulled out. Everyone, let's do it together. The two corpses' sudden display of power did indeed startle everyone. But everyone here was someone who had walked through mountains of swords and seas of fire. After a short moment of panic, everyone immediately raised their weapons to face the enemy. The swordmasters raised their weapons and slashed at the two corpses. The two ancient corpses, one male and one female, only lightly waved their hands, and dozens of men were sent flying. This strength is too great. What the hell is this thing? I clearly hit her just now, but it felt like I was hitting a big rock. It's so hard. The people who were sent flying fell to the ground and wailed. They couldn't believe that there were corpses in this world that could be so powerful. Just a wave of the corpses could send so many people flying. They couldn't help but admire this strength. Chapter 373. Since the swordmasters were useless, the magicians began to attack. A series of spells hit the two corpses. The two corpses were pushed back a few steps, but they were not hurt at all. The two corpses were filled with murderous intent. They could see nothing but the instinct to kill. Everyone was on high alert and ready to fight at any time. They were afraid of the two corpses. Everyone, let's find a way to leave this hall first. At this time, no one wanted to fight with the two corpses. Since they could not win, they had to run. Were they going to stay here and fight? Let's go. Xiazhua grabbed Fengwu's hand, and the two of them ran to the back of the hall. With the large group of people attracting the two corpses' attention, they were able to escape successfully. They did not encounter any obstacles. Damn, that gigolo ran too fast. Those who were still looking for an opportunity to slip away all cursed in their hearts. So many of them were risking their lives here. But the gigolo ran away with the black-haired lowly. That detestable animal running away so quickly. Did he have any shame? Xiazhua did not know that he had pulled down the bottom line in these people's hearts. Even if he knew, he would not care. Fengwu and Xiazhua ran forward one after another. The two corpses were too strong. Even the Fengwu girl did not want to fight with them. Originally, Xiaochun's purification ability could purify the evil spirits, but the evil spirits here were not ordinary. Baobao did not recommend her to use Xiaochun's power to purify the evil spirits here. The source of the evil spirits here must be found. Before the source was found, even if Fengwu purified the evil spirits, there would be an endless amount of evil spirits being drawn into the tomb. Baobao did not want Fengwu to waste her time, so he used telepathy to tell Fengwu not to use the pure sword's power to purify this place. Speaking of the pure sword, Baobao had a lot of questions. He knew that the pure sword was the weapon of the pure goddess. Legend has it that the pure goddess fell in love with a man she shouldn't have fallen in love with. In order to not let her heart become ugly, she used her pure heart as the main material, while her heart was still pure. At the same time, she found many materials in the god realm and made a divine sword. This sword was the pure sword. The pure goddess took the pure sword to find the man. The man's identity was not ordinary. There were even legends that said that the man was a demon god. In his inheritance, he remembered that at that time, there were gods who said that it was a conspiracy of the demon realm. They wanted the pure goddess to lose her pure heart and the power to purify everything. At that time, the demons would be even more fearless. For this purpose, someone in the demon realm disguised himself as a god and made the pure goddess fall in love with him. The pure goddess later found out about this scheme, so she used her pure heart to create the pure sword. The pure sword would never be tainted and had the power to purify all evil. With the pure sword, the pure goddess and the man fought for 3 days and 3 nights on the border between the god realm and the demon realm. In the end, no one knew the result. Some people said that they died together. Some people said that the pure goddess finally died in the man's hands, and the pure sword's whereabouts were unknown. Baobao did not expect that something like the pure sword, which could only be seen in legends, would appear in the hands of a normal person like Fengwu. This was simply too inconceivable. Moreover, the pure sword spirit loved Fengwu so much. It knew that the pure sword was a divine weapon that could not be used by evil people. Only a person with a pure heart was qualified to be its master. Fengwu could become the master of the pure sword. Her heart must be pure. Even Baobao himself liked to stay by her side, which was obvious. It felt that Fengwu seemed to have a secret, but as for what the secret was, Baobao did not know. Its ability was to predict the future. Because it was still young, its strength was half-baked. It could not accurately predict what it wanted to predict. If its ability was to know everything, as long as it knew what had happened, then it must have stopped Fengwu from entering the tomb as early as it knew about this trip. It was useless to think too much now. Fengwu took Shouzo, and Baobao quickly ran to the end of the road. They did not expect that the end of the road would be a cliff. The road was on the other side of the cliff. If they wanted to go, the only way was to jump over the cliff. I'll take you there. Fengwu grabbed Shouzo's hand and wanted to fly over with him. Although the distance between the two sides of the cliff was far, there were several stone pillars in the middle that could be stepped on. There was no problem flying over with Qinggong. Shouzo was about to nod. No. Baobao's voice suddenly interrupted. Do you think that the sea god will let you go so easily? If I'm not wrong, there is a formation between the two cliffs. Once someone wants to fly over, their ability will be immediately sealed by the formation. Think about it. When you fly in the air and suddenly can't use any ability, what will happen? Baobao was a wise beast. Its little brain had always been very smart. In addition to the knowledge passed down from generation to generation, it was much better than Fengwu, a girl who had transmigrated, and Shouzo, a reborn genius who had stayed at home for hundreds of years. Fengwu and Ajur could not help but imagine the scene. They imagined themselves falling down the cliff halfway and falling into pieces. They swallowed their saliva. That scene was too beautiful. It was better not to think about it. Baobao is so smart. Fengwu girl touched the eggshell on Baobao's head. Her eyes were shining as she praised. That's right. Don't you know who I am? I am the most intelligent magical beast in the world. There is nothing that can stop me. If it wasn't for the fact that Xiaozuo was still around, it would have definitely taken out its identity as the wise beast to show off. Unfortunately, Baobao could not know that its identity as a wise beast had long been lost. Shouzo, of course, would not take the initiative to say that he knew its identity. This matter was related to the secret of his rebirth. Of course, he could not say it. What do we do now? There is no bridge in the middle. There is no way to cross. Without magic and douqi, they could only rely on their own strength. But no matter how strong their body was, it was impossible to jump over the cliff. There was no bridge, and they could not use their strength to fly over. They would be trapped to death. Chapter 374. At this time, a shout came from not far away. Hurry up. Damn it, there's no road ahead. Get out of here, the two monsters are coming. Let's hope that the binding scroll can last a little longer. Let's get out of here before they break free. Behind Fengwu and Shouzo, a long line of people rushed over, talking nonstop as they ran. The panic in their eyes was almost tangible. Damn it, there's no road ahead. The cliff successfully blocked the group of people who had just escaped from the hands of the ancient zombies. Fortunately, we still have the flight scroll. Many people had already taken out the flight scroll, wanting to fly over the cliff. Stop. Don't do this if you don't want to die. Shouzo quickly stopped these people. Boy, what are you doing? Don't block our escape. That monster is about to catch up. Shouzo's obstruction immediately caused these people to shout in dissatisfaction. There's a formation at the bottom of this cliff. Once someone tries to use magic or douqi to fly over here, all their power will be sealed and they will fall from here. Shouzo was not a person who would not help others. Although these people's attitude towards him was not friendly, he also did not want to see so many of them die under this cliff for no reason. Is this true? This was serious. Although they looked down on Shouzo's weak and almost non-existent strength, they did not dare to ignore this news. If this news was false, it would not be so bad. But if it was true, then if they wanted to fly over, wouldn't they die without a doubt? Some people were skeptical of Shouzo's words, and some did not believe it at all. But these people put down the flight scroll that was about to be successfully activated. Stop spouting nonsense. I think the two of you just can't get over it. That's why you want all of us to die with you. Bess provoked again. This girl would not let go of any opportunity to make Fengwu and the others suffer. Bess looked down on men like Shouzo, who only knew how to rely on women to protect him from the bottom of her heart. She did not believe what Shouzo said at all, of course. The more important reason was that she did not trust anyone related to Fengwu. If you don't believe me, you can try activating the flight scroll. Although Shozo didn't want to see them die, he wouldn't stop someone from courting death. Not to mention, this person was Bess, who had been causing trouble for them, and tried to kill him. Bess's eyes drifted away. She wanted to use the scroll to directly slap him in the face, but looking at this kid's fearless look, it seemed like he really had something to say. Could it be that what he said was true? Bess couldn't help but wonder. As for the method of activating the scroll, and testing it on herself, Bess didn't intend to let herself take such a risk. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to do. At this moment, a bold person stood out and looked at Xiazhua, who was obviously a weakling, with disdain. LZ, I don't believe it. I'm going to try it today. Just when everyone thought that this guy would directly use a flight scroll to fly over, he unexpectedly took out a rope and tied it around his waist. He tied one end of the rope to a big rock nearby. Watching the tall and strong man make a full set of safety measures for himself, everyone blinked. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. Don't look at the impulsive, boorish appearance of this guy. In fact, there was a fine point in his rough appearance. Look at her heroic posture when she tied up the rope, her heroic spirit when she activated the flight scroll, and her graceful posture when she was falling down. This was... People up there, don't just stand there. Quickly help pull me up. The man's voice came from the bottom of the cliff. Quickly pull him up. After hurriedly pulling him up, the man untied the rope tied around his waist, patted his butt and stood up. After LZ's personal test, this kid really didn't lie. You don't need to say that, we all saw it. Everyone ridiculed in their hearts. What should we do now? How do we go over? This question appeared in everyone's mind at the same time. If they couldn't go over, then they could only wait for death. When the two ferocious ancient corpses came over, they would definitely be killed. That death would be too miserable. Fortunately, this problem didn't bother everyone for too long, and a smart person came up with an idea. The one who came up with the idea was the female magician, who hadn't spoken a word. This magician had been very quiet on the way, and this was the first time she made her presence felt. The female magician had an eagle-type magic beast, and the idea she came up with was to use her magic beast to tie the rope to the opposite side. Then they would step on the rope to go over. Although they couldn't use any magic or douqi, it wasn't difficult to maintain balance on the rope. This idea was unanimously approved by everyone. When choosing the rope, they specially chose a thick and strong one, which was safer. Because of the help of the female magician's magic beast, the rope was quickly tied. The female magician was the first to walk over. Her sense of balance was very good, and it wasn't difficult for her to step on the rope over the cliff. When she walked to the opposite side, it proved that this idea was feasible, and everyone lined up one by one to go over. At most, this rope could only be used by 2 people at a time. If there were more people, it would affect the balance. Fengwu and Xiazhua didn't fight to be the first to line up, because they didn't fight for a position, they were the last to line up. Everyone walked very fast, and not long after, the second to last group was already standing on the rope and walking to the opposite side. At this time, a roar was heard, and a man and woman with a delicate face slowly walked towards them. These 2 people were the 2 ancient corpses. The ancient corpses actually chased after them, and the people standing on the opposite side of the cliff trembled with fear. They were very lucky to have lined up in a good position and escaped the evil claws of the ancient corpses. The second last group hadn't gone very far yet, and Fengwu was the only one who could fight on the edge of the cliff. Retreat, hide. Fengwu withdrew the short sword in her hand, and a silver long sword appeared in her hand. This sword was pure sword, and Fengwu slowly unsheathed it, facing the male and female ancient corpses. Be careful. Xiazhua nodded and said worriedly. N. Fengwu responded, and took the initiative to attack the 2 ancient corpses. The surrounding sword chi was like a rainbow. Fengwu's sword intent was the natural sword intent, and her sword intent carried the vitality of all things. But in the vitality, there was a trace of death chi. From life to death, it was a natural reincarnation, And some people said that nature was actually reincarnation, and Fengwu's sword intent carried the meaning of reincarnation. Because Fengwu's strength was far from pure sword, Fengwu rarely used pure sword to attack herself. Her strength was still too low for pure sword, and when she controlled pure sword to attack, the purifying power of pure sword would be affected by her strength. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.